He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library, and we're streaming on youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. Hi.
Hi, to me you're saying hi? Hi,
Hello,
Marjorie,
Jim
how are
Browdy.
you?
I'm
Let
fine,
me just
thank
give
you.
you a heads up. In about 30 minutes, it's Live Music Friday. We have two performers from the Boston Lyric Opera's production of The Anonymous Lover, and it's going to knock your socks off. So stick around for that. But first, it's been 11 days with no school for some 12,000 students in Newton as the school committee there cancels February break to help make up for the lost days. Some parents have filed lawsuits against the union to compel teachers back into the classroom. One of the lawsuits calls for the arrest of the president of the Newton Teachers Union. Governor Healy is getting involved, calling for a judge to appoint a third-party arbitrator to force the union and the school committee to settle their contract. I'm not sure a judge can do that. We'll find out in a minute. Newton School Committee Chair Chris Bresky broke down earlier this week as he reported that no deal was reached to reopen the schools.
There's really only one kind of progress that matters right now. My kids aren't going to school again. This has gone too far. We need our kids back in school. And only the union can unilaterally make that decision.
By the way, speaking of the union, we have many union members here in their blue knit caps here in the studio at the Boston Public Library. But joining us now on Zoom is that Newton School Committee Chair, Christopher Bresky. Christopher, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning. So I understand you were negotiating until 6 o'clock this morning. Do you have any updates? Can you tell us when these kids might be back in school?
Yeah, so that's correct. We were at it until 6 o'clock in the morning. We are really close. We have solved most of the major issues. I think we're in agreement on broadly the economics of the contract. We're down to a couple very fine points. Unfortunately the clock just kind of ran out on us this morning at 6 a.m. As folks were trying to negotiate some of these details of language, after being up 24 hours, I think the decision was made that maybe it's best to, everyone gets a couple hours of sleep and starts fresh and hopefully a little more clear-eyed today to get this thing done.
When are you meeting again today?
The mediation officially restarts at 1 p.m. today. And that's just due to the nature of everyone's schedules to be able to get everyone back in the same building again.
There is a statement put out by the Newton Teachers Association. I'm sure you saw it. I'm quoting from a channel WCVB report. School Committee Chair Chris Bresky lost all integrity Thursday after Bresky publicly declared that money remained the only issue separating the NTA and the school committee. The union significantly adjusted its financial proposal by 4 a.m. The financial proposals between the two parties were identical. How do you respond to what the Teachers Association had to say?
Yeah, so I mean, look, in terms of comments about integrity and whatever, I mean, I think I've heard enough of that over the last 2 weeks to understand how the mass teachers and the NTA is putting out that sort of information. I think there's certainly truth in the statement. We did agree on the economics. We were very close. Again, it was these couple fine points that we're trying to nail down, and kids will be back in school on Monday once we do that.
Well, I don't want to get lost in the weeds, but what are the couple of fine points, Chris?
Yeah, so there was talk, going into the 6 o'clock hour of items that really related to sort of the structure of the school day. Some of the things that were being debated were, what is the definition of a teacher's prep time, and if I wasn't in the room for this part of it because we sort of broke out into two different groups, but if a teacher wants to go get a coffee, meet a friend, go take a yoga class during the day, can that be considered prep time? And I think there was a little disagreement there.
One of their demands, let me be clear, one of their demands is they be able to leave to take a yoga class in the middle of the day?
That was an example that was brought up.
Huh. Okay. We're talking to the chair of the Newton School Committee, Chris Bresky.
You know, Chris, the mayor says there's not enough money in Newton, and the taxpayers in Newton turned down a tax increase last year. As you probably know, after a new contract in Andover, layoffs came. So are you talking about, is there going to be enough money, and are you worried about layoffs?
Yeah, no. So I think we're past the money, and I think we got there last night. The parties were able to come to agreement on the money. I'm happy that's the case. I think we were able to do something that recognizes all the work our teachers do, and still allows the district to be sustainable, to not have to lay off employees. I mean, from a school committee perspective, we did not want to have to put out the statement Andover did that said, hey, good news, we settled a contract, the strike is over. Bad news, we got to start laying off people. And, very specifically, we were really focused, and the union was very focused on increasing compensation for our what are called Unit C folks, which are really aides or paraprofessionals that, work directly with students. It's a tough job. It's an important job. And, some of those folks are going to see increases in their wages of 50% over the life of this contract. So we really put forth our best effort to make sure we're able to attract the best folks to those roles.
Christopher Bresky, there have been a lot of talk, as there should be, from both sides. We had two teachers with us the other day in studio about the students and obviously catching them up, particularly students with special needs. But one of the things we also talked to two of the teachers in Newton about the other day is about the relationship after this acrimonious, hopefully only 11-day strike. Do you worry about that relationship post what's happened after the last couple of weeks? And how are you going to how are you going to address that?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I mean, this has been a really painful experience for everyone. And, I don't just mean, for us folks who are in the room trying to negotiate this. I mean, it's really kind of torn at the fabric of Newton. And Newton is a bit of an education obsessed town. It's the reason we all moved there for the schools. And so it's really kind of tearing the city apart a little bit. So, there's a couple levels of it. There's, making sure that kids and adults are reconnecting back in the buildings is absolutely priority number one. And then, reconnecting those adult relationships both in the building between parents and educators, between, the school district and the community as a whole. There's going to be a lot of work to be done there. And we were still in the phase of rebuilding back trust from the pandemic. And so now this is, I mean, look, there's no way to sugarcoat it. This is going to be a big step backwards in that effort. And, I don't know what the, what the secret sauce is going to be to say that we're going to get past that as quickly as we can. But I mean, if we're being realistic, it's not going to be all better day one. I mean, there's just no way. And time is going to be part of that recipe. But I think we all have to, as adults, be patient with one another, kind of show our kids how it's done as to, how we as adults can get through these difficult times. Can I just
ask briefly, did the school committee support the request of one of the parents in this litigation that the president of the union be jailed?
No.
Okay.
Chris, as you know, like police officers, teachers aren't supposed to strike. It's illegal in Massachusetts for teachers to strike. We talked about the two teachers we interviewed the other day about this, but Brookline, Malden, Haverhill, Woburn, Andover, and Newton, everybody seems to be ignoring the illegality of this and those unions and going ahead to strike. Do you think strike should be illegal for teachers?
Look, I think strike should be illegal for teachers. And I mean, this is exactly why. Well, I mean, we're living the real damage and the real damage to our kids. I mean, this is, you can't overstate how difficult this is for kids to even understand and process what's going on. Set aside the just sheer, academic time and the disruption, but, this sense of sort of loss and not really even being able to process, why this is happening. That's real. And, from that perspective, and I've said this all along, we as a school committee, we were always going to do everything we could to settle this contract in the best way possible, to make sure our educators had a really competitive contract, to make sure our kids had what they needed. And going on strike, didn't change that in any way. We were already fully committed to seeing that through, and you can't be more committed than fully committed. So,
but Chris Bresky, if I may, on the strike issue, you said this is proof why strike should be illegal. You negotiated for 16 months and didn't get anywhere. If there hadn't been a strike, why should one believe that this very close to a deal today would have ever happened? It didn't happen over 16 months.
Yeah, so I think the question you're really asking is, why has there not been strikes in the Commonwealth for a long time? And then all of a sudden, over the last several years, we've seen, as you mentioned, you had Haverhill, you had Andover, et cetera, and they're popping up every couple months now, it seems. You look at the how these things are developing, how they're occurring. You can even look at, the materials that each individual union is putting out there, and they're all similar. There's a common thread between all of them, and I don't think it's a stretch to say that common thread is the Massachusetts Teachers Association.
But that was my question. My question was, why should people believe that if 16 months without a strike didn't produce a deal, that had they continued down that path, you'd have a deal on February 2nd, which you appeal to be close to having? Isn't the strike what provoked the deal?
No, I think there's a presumption you're making that the school committee acted differently, and that the union didn't act differently, and I don't think that's a correct presumption.
So what you're saying is there were compromises on both sides. Is that what you're saying? I don't get what you're saying.
Yeah, so I'm saying, the 16 months of inability to come together to an agreement, which, I have very publicly said is a collective failure. I can't say that, there wasn't, let's call it political pressure to, move forward and head down this path. And, from the school committee's perspective, we have been committed to getting a deal. And, the fact that, the economics are now within reach to do that, are not by virtue of anything we've done.
Christopher Bresky, we really appreciate your time. We hope you do cut a deal today with the union, and thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it.
I sure hope so too, and I appreciate it.
Thank you
thank
so
you very much for being with us. We've been speaking with Newton School Committee Chair Christopher Bresky, and we thank him very much for being here. As we mentioned, Jim did earlier in the week, we had 2 teachers from the Newton Teachers Association with us as well. So after a quick break, we're going to take your calls at 877-301-8970, how you react to the strike if you're from Newton, how you react to striking in general, if your kids are in the schools, where you see this situation. Today, our number again to call or text, 877-301-8970.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We're live at the Boston Public Library. Jim Browdy, Mardregan, streaming at youtube.com and facebook.com/GBH News. Just a couple of days ago, we spoke to two members of the Newton Teachers Association. Today, on the 11th day of a strike, we spoke to the chair of the school committee. And for the next, we only have about a dozen minutes. We're going to talk to you about what your reaction is to what's going on in Newton. If you're from another Massachusetts community, are you worried something like this is going to come to you? What was your reaction to what the school committee chair had to say? 877-301-8970. What was your reaction?
To what he had to say?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's the same as I always think about these things. It was terrible what they were paying these paraprofessionals. It was terrible money. On the other hand, we hear constantly that kids of color, poor kids, have not recovered, and all from what happened in the pandemic. Newton has 13% of its people are low income. This has been devastating for the Metco kids, for those kids. I think teachers are essential workers, like cops and firefighters.
Did you buy his line that the strike was counterproductive, as opposed to my position that 16 months, no strike, no deal, 11-day strike? There apparently is going to be a deal today. 16
months is a very, very long time, but I don't think the MTA is right when it wants to make strikes legal in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Let's go to Sarah in Rhode Island. You're next first, actually, on Boston Public Radio. Welcome, Sarah. Hi.
Hi. I am a teacher in the Newton Public Schools. I've been teaching since 2008 in Newton, but really I've been teaching for well over 20 years.
Yep.
I have never called into a radio station before. I was just so frustrated with the comments that Chris presented. I mean, for him to claim that what they're fighting over right now is to control what teachers do during their prep time is really insulting and demoralizing. We're professionals. We've been in school. We have master's degrees plus. And for them to say that if we, I mean, I don't have time to go to the bathroom and finish my lunch, never mind go to a yoga class.
We have a lot of teachers here. I don't think they think anybody's going to yoga class from the thumbs down I'm seeing from the crowd that's
Sarah,
here.
thank you for your call and thanks for your work. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
Although maybe that would be a nice break, you know, from the stress of all these little kids looking at you up all day long. I mean, maybe you do need a little.
Can you imagine doing this, by the way?
Teaching?
Yeah.
Not in a million years.
Teacher, shrink, counselor, mentor,
I couldn't
whatever.
do it.
Jenny and Newton.
Bad enough, Jim.
Doing this. Jenny, whatever this is. Jenny and Newton, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you much for your call. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I'm a 20-year veteran teacher in Newton.
Oh.
I did Pierce Elementary, proud teacher there. I don't live in Newton, but a question I do have is, how is the school committee and the parents and the children, how are we going to make a bridge after this?
That's a big deal.
You know, when they came back from COVID, we were so loved. And now I don't live in Newton, but I teach there. I know so many people there. I'm worried about going into Trader Joe's and being asked, you know, why are you here? Why are you striking? And when we get back into school, what are the children going to say to us? What questions have they heard, or what have they heard their parents say?
Yeah, but can I say something, Jenny, that I think is positive? Obviously, I share the same concerns as an outsider, because I asked both your fellow teachers the other day, and I asked Chris Bresky a few minutes ago. I think the fact that the chair of the school committee was willing to acknowledge publicly that it's going to be a difficult road, and it's a real great concern. Again, actions are the issue, not just words. I think is a pretty hopeful sign, as opposed to some Pollyanna BS that the contract dispute is resolved and everything is, just sweetness and light. So I don't think it's going to be easy either. I understand your concerns, but I think the fact that he acknowledged them is pretty important. I hope I'm right. Jenny, good luck. Thank you for the call. 877-301-8970. We're obviously talking about the 11th day of a teacher's strike. And we have a call out to the Teachers Association to see if they share the perspective of the school committee chair that this thing is likely to get resolved today, which is the impression he left us with.
Yeah, and there's talk of, I think that, who said that was it the mayor that said they were going to take away February vacation?
Yeah, but there's some concern about that too,
about that
apparently.
as well.
Yeah.
Corey in Waltham, thank you for calling.
Hi, Corey.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
We can. Thank you for calling.
Great, thank you. I just have 3 quick points. So
Please.
I am a Waltham resident, and I have been a Newton teacher for 24 years. So first of all, there's been a lot of fingers pointing at the Massachusetts Teachers Association, which has been around since 1845. You don't get 98% of your teachers to vote for a strike without having something seriously wrong in your own neighborhood. This has nothing to do with the MTA. I think it speaks to bigger problems that municipalities are having, and how they pit kind of different services against one another. For example, our police officers in Newton haven't had a contract for 2.5 years. But because they're public safety, they're not allowed to strike either.
By the way, we should say
that's
the proposal on the ballot that would legalize strikes for teachers would not legalize strikes for public safety people like cops, for example.
Exactly.
What's your
And
other point?
Right. And okay, so my other point is that, Chris Bresky likes to sort of give people pieces of information without all the information. And I think he was very misleading when he said, we just have to hammer out a few language details, because what he didn't mention is that those were 2 big details that they had agreed upon until we hit the financial agreement. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, we changed our minds on the social workers and on teachers' prep time. And so I think that's really not good faith that they are backing down on those things that they had agreed to.
What's the third point,
when
Corey?
we got to the financials?
We got it. What's the third point?
Actually, you know what? Those are my points.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate your call. By the way,
it wasn't the mayor. It wasn't the mayor. It was the school committee that voted Thursday night to get rid of February vacation.
Talia Gallagher, who's one of the 2 teachers with us the other day, just in response to our question, confirms they were close last night, but sort of like what Corey is saying. They also say that Newton, the city side, started relitigating points that they thought were settled. So it sounds like the Teachers Association is not quite as optimistic about the prospects for today, at least as of the moment, as the chair of the school committee is. Let's hope they do resolve their differences today.
David and Newton, thank you for calling.
Hey.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
So I am in my 17th year teaching in Newton North High School.
Oh.
And some of the things that I have heard the chair of the school committee kind of not only say to you today, but perpetuated some of these claims and misinformation in press conferences about the role of the MTA is really insulting, honestly, and demeaning to the hundreds and hundreds of educators that have been really kind of screaming into the wind, trying to sound the alarm on big problems in the Newton Public Schools for really years now. It is really unfortunate to me that that narrative is out there, and less attention has been made, or has been paid rather, to the role of, say, the lawyer at Jamesport Newton Public Schools, Liz Valerio, who has made literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe it's into the million range at this point, I don't know, emerging pretty much unscathed. They have as one of the negotiations committee members, Paul Levy, a guy that isn't even living in the country, wrote a literal book on union busting and serves right now on the board of a firm that deals with negotiations.
David, and in fairness, I've known Paul Levy for a couple of decades. I read the book. It is not a pro-union book, but I think describing it as the guide for union busting may be a bit unfair. The thing that I have to say is an interesting issue is when Levy was asked by the Boston Globe, because he's participating remotely, where he is, he refused to disclose, which is really odd, I should say. David, thank you for the call. We've got a lot of calls.
He wrote a book about his experience when he used to run
with
Beth
SEIU,
Israel, about the Service Employees International Union,
And he was head of the Mass Water Resources Authority many, many, many years ago when they were cleaning up Boston Harbor. I know where you don't.
Well, in the olden days, I used to say, has anybody ever seen Jim Browdy and Paul Levy in the same room?
Okay, they did say that. That was 30 years. That is true. It had nothing to do with schools.
Nothing to do with schools or the Water Resources Authority.
No,
but
I know.
they
Let's not
looked
talk
a little bit alike.
They might have.
Barbara from Falmouth, thank you for calling.
You're unbelievable. You really are unbelievable.
Hi, Barbara.
It's true, though. Hi, Barbara. Thank you for calling.
having me on.
Sure.
I called in because my heart just really aches for what's gone on. I was a teacher in Grafton at the time that we all went on strike, We were led by the same association that has led the Newton teachers.
Yep.
I have listened so carefully, and I feel so badly because they set up a crisis center. Anyone who was on the fence, they got on board very quickly once they set up a crisis center. And when they called us back in and said, it's over, you come back in, you're all going to hear what you got. At the end of the day, with what we lost in pay and everything, we didn't get anything. But that said, I went on to teach outside Chicago, where my teachers voted to join the Teamsters. If you can imagine, there's actually many teachers that are a branch of the Teamsters.
Yes, there are.
And that was very, very tough also. And at the bottom of all this is there's a pot of money. And you need to be involved. All parents need to be involved in what they want that pot of money in their town to do. And that there should be no fighting over this. You should just hand the teachers the pot and tell them, divide it up how you see fit. And that's how we ended up in Chicago, outside of Chicago, actually doing it. They handed us the pot of money, and we, as the teachers, decided who should get how much. And it made so much more sense.
Barbara,
this is a hard thing, and they're going to be looked at differently by the parents forever, and they're going to look at themselves in the mirror differently. It's a very game-changing, life-changing experience.
Barbara, thanks. By the way, we should reiterate what Marjorie said. I think it was in March of last year that there was an override to get, I think, several $1 million additional into the school system, and it was rejected. I think 53% or something. A couple of debt exclusions, I'm not going to give you a headache about that, were approved. But, you know, Barbara says split up the pot. Sometimes unions believe, not just this one, the pot needs to be expanded so that the constituents you're serving are better served. So.
Well, what's kind of too bad, too, is that I think the union's been fined with almost $500,000 at this point.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
It is.
And you think of what else that might have been used for. Well, instead of paying fines.
Well, I think obviously they've made a calculation, don't you think, that it's a price worth paying
I guess so.
for what they hope to come out of this with. We have time for one more quick one, and it's Tara in Newton. Welcome to the show. Thanks for calling, Tara. Tara.
Hello?
Hi, you're on. Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Go ahead.
I'm just calling. I am a Newton teacher.
Yep.
I am Unit C. So hearing Chris Rusky say that Unit C is important and they are essential employees is a bit confusing to hear. Considering him being the head chair, he knows that we have been living at poverty rates for years. Shouldn't that be one of the first things that they wanted to come to terms with in 6, although he proposed an insurance that would cost us $6,000 to $8,000 more, which is a quarter of my salary.
Tara, you're a paraprofessional. You're what I've heard called paraprofessional. Is that what you're talking about? The ones that were making like $20,000 or some crazy amount of money?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
was that your salary? Was that your salary? Was that your salary?
Yeah, it is roughly. And so the insurance that they were putting out for us is a quarter of what my salary is. So if they really wanted to fix this situation, they had the chance, but they're pushing it so that we're in a worse off stance than we were last year and years prior.
Well, I hope the outcome
so
doesn't...
it's confusing that it's not in their hopes to fix this.
Tara, I hope they do.
Yeah, that
Thank
seemed
you.
to be one of the biggest horrible things here, to pay people that are teaching children that amount of money. That's absolutely horrible. So hopefully they got a big fat raise.
And by the way, I'm sorry, a lot of people want to talk. We just don't have more time. We're going to continue this next week. And when it is resolved, we will also hopefully have the president of the union and the head of the school committee, maybe the mayor, to sort of do a post-mortem on a situation that's getting a lot of attention, not just in Massachusetts.
I just want to say I've
country.
been reading the text here. I think it was unfortunate that the yoga class was never mentioned. That was that seems to be 90% of the people are objecting to the notion that anybody was going to go to yoga to the middle of the day. But anyway, we are moving on. We were speaking about the school strike in Newton, which we hope is going to be over any day now. Today would be absolutely great. Up next, it's time for Live Music Friday, and fitting for Black History Month, the Boston Lyric Opera is about to launch a production of a work by an 18th century violinist, composer, and swordsman, Jim, you probably haven't heard of, called The Black Mozart. We're going to hear all about The Black Mozart. We're going to hear some great opera music next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. It is Friday, and thus it is time for Live Music Friday on BPR. There's a good chance you haven't heard the name of Joseph Boulogne, the 18th century Renaissance man, son of a French nobleman and his enslaved mistress, who went on to become a champion fencer, a composer, a world-renowned violinist, performing for the likes of Marie Antoinette. This month, the Boston Lyric Opera is staging a production of Boulogne's only completed opera, an 18th century romantic comedy called The Anonymous Lover, just in time for Valentine's weekend. Show runs February 16th through the 18th. For more information to get tickets, go to BLO.org. Here at the interview desk is the BLO's really brand new artistic director, Nina Yoshida Nelson. Congratulations, by the way, and welcome. We're really glad to have you. And playwright Kirsten Greenidge, who wrote a new version of the show's book. That's the portion that's spoken, not sung, in English, we should say. Great to have you too, Kirsten. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thank you both for being here. We're so excited to hear you. We heard you this morning, and our listeners.
Well, we didn't hear them this morning. We heard their colleagues.
Yeah, we heard the group, I should say, this morning. So, Nina, Jim was saying before, you don't often see a performer become the artistic director. So you kind of, you're a Renaissance woman, I guess.
Yeah, you could say that. Oftentimes as singers, we are actually the last people that are brought in for the artistic process. And so, everything else has been decided on, all the artistic sets, costumes, everything, the storytelling, and then we come into the room. And so as a singer, it's not often that you see people that are then going and producing opera. And so it's been really exciting for me as I make this transition to be on the other side and learn kind of both sides, both the administration and the singing.
By the way, before we introduce Kirsten into this succession, we have a little clip of you singing a piece from Samson and Delilah in 2022. Here's Nina. That is the new artistic director of the BLO. So, Kirsten, you're a Boston person, correct?
I am.
And to
yes.
say you were prolific is insane, by the way. Your resume is like
unbelievable.
A book.
Yeah.
So how'd you get involved in this, and why'd you get involved?
I got involved because I worked with BLO a few years ago during the pandemic on an opera that was rendered as basically like a TV series, the first, like a season. And so they brought in 8 showrunners, 8 writers, and we wrote it like a TV show. And that was lovely and a wonderful room to be a part of. And so now I'm back for this.
Do you speak French?
I don't speak
So how did you do how did you do this?
Well, the opera is not widely done in terms of a work from the canon, but it has been done a lot in the last few years.
I see.
And so I was able to take outlines, some other French to English translations, and render them into what we have now.
Had you heard of Boulogne before this?
I hadn't. I maybe had seen like a fleeting, there's a Chevalier movie, and so I had seen that last year, but did not know him as a composer or artist.
How about you? I mean, it is so stunning to see somebody of this level of accomplishment on so many fronts. Talk about a Renaissance person, and not have heard. Had you heard of him before?
I hadn't either until really post-pandemic, when our industry started reckoning with the idea of equity and diversity, and all of a sudden we started to see his music around more, and it was really exciting to see something that has been so forgotten for so many years be brought back to life.
So was it just racism that he was a black guy, or was it some other thing?
I don't know that there's an answer to that.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing to see what he did accomplish at that time, and the fact that he was able to do as many things as he was as a black man is really impressive, and it's something we should be celebrating.
I like the swordsman part. Do we know exactly what that meant? Was he one of these guys that would...
Fencer.
No, they don't mean swordsman in that way.
Well, I wasn't sure.
You are horrible.
He was a fencer.
Well,
But
actually,
really,
in the movie, if you watch the trailer of the movie, one of the descriptions is lover. By the way, they do describe him as as quite the lover.
So he was a swordsman in many senses of the word.
Let's move on from that. Yes, we should.
I get it. Okay. So we're going to hear a song here in just a couple of seconds. What are we going to hear?
Can we talk for another
Sure.
minute before? Just tell us a little bit about him, if we can. I mean, as someone who's relatively new to both of you, and I'm guessing totally new to our audience. Tell us a little bit about him.
What we do know is that his dad was a nobleman, his mother was enslaved, and he's brought to France when he's around 8 years old, and he begins to study, and it becomes apparent that he's well gifted musically in terms of he becomes a composer, a conductor, a violinist, and obviously quite handy with a sword or a foil, I guess.
No, he was a champion fencer in all truth. I mean,
And so he's working, and we don't know why his work does not enter into the canon in the way we might think it would have been, but he was also aligned with the aristocracy, and so he's writing around the time of the French Revolution. So it could also be that he was not in favor as politics shifted at that time, and I think it is believed that most of his work was destroyed in some way because of that allegiance. So that we don't know much, but I think we do know that at least.
And Nina, the sense I get, and admittedly, this is mostly from reading about the film, and I don't know how much of the film is based on. For example, the duel with Mozart. No one knows if that really happened,
Exactly.
even though it is likely they knew each other and they obviously excelled at the same time. His talent, because of the racism that is fairly obvious he had to live through, his talent must have been incredibly immense for leaders in France to decide to give him a place to be heard, no?
Absolutely, I think so. And I mean, you hear it in his music, and you hear it in this opera. And what we have done is we took Kirsten's new book and brought some life to it. And so the book that she's written is in English, and it'll be sung in French. And the French will have subtitles, so don't worry about not understanding what's going on. And we've really created this fun, romantic comedy that celebrates love and joy, and it's really exciting.
How long, you've been in this job a week?
This is day 2.
Day 2?
Day 2? Oh my gosh.
How was day 1? Great?
It was a lot.
So it was?
But you know what? It's really exciting. It's really exciting to be part of this team.
And Kirsten, before you introduce the performers, and then they're going to join us, by the way, and tell us what they're going to sing, tell us a little bit about your work. As I said, you are really... you're a massive producer, I should say. It's amazing. Share with people some of your background.
Yeah, well, I grew up here in Boston, so the first play that I saw was at the Huntington Theater.
Is that true?
Joe Turner's kept coming on. The first play, adult play. So my mom had taken me for one. That was a 7th grade field trip. So I'm really excited that this piece will be in the theater that I decided I wanted to be a playwright.
That's great.
And I studied at University of Iowa, so they have a playwriting program. Came back to Boston, and now I'm at BU and writing.
But you also mentioned the Wheelock Family Theater
right.
And I think that is one of the great gems.
It is.
Tell us about going there as a kid.
I went there. I was in my first two professional. So I used to be an actor. So my first two professional productions were as a child actor in Tuck Everlasting and Peter Pan, a long time ago. And there were musicals.
Yeah.
And I also took classes there, and they were integral to providing myself a space to be able to practice theater. Things have changed a lot more in Greater Boston, but when I was coming up, it was very difficult to get cast in shows locally. And so Wheelock, with a determination to uplift diversity and representation in terms of race on their stages, gave me a space to be able to perform. Before I realized that performing is probably not my strongest.
Okay.
So Nadia, can you introduce the performers who will join us in a second and tell us what they're going to perform for us?
Yes, I think first up is Omar Najmi. And
who's been here before.
Yes. He is a favorite of ours at BLO. He was once a long time ago an emerging artist, and we love to...
He's emerged now.
He has emerged,
yes.
and he is singing the lead role in this opera. And so I think he's first up.
And with Brianna. Am I wrong about that? Or are you performing by yourself?
I think Omar's first.
Oh, you are performing. Oh, then that's fine.
Yeah.
And what is he performing?
I actually don't know.
Depuis longtemps? Is that correct?
Introducing it.
Okay. I got it. Whatever. We're thrilled to have you. Thank you so much. And here he is. Omar, you want to join us? Why don't you come over and join us? By the way, the pianist was Ji Young Lee. You want to come over here and join?
Yep.
We're joined now by the man you just heard. Omar Najmi plays Valcor, the leading male character, secretly in love with Leontine, but can only express it through letters. Brianna Robinson is the cover for Leontine and plays Jeanette. Welcome to you both. It's great to have you here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So we presume that you're writing a lot of letters to Leontine during this whole performance. Is that the idea, that you try to persuade her through your words?
Absolutely. And not only during this, for 4 years prior to the start of the opera, I have been sending her letters, gifts, flowers.
Yeah.
So is it getting anywhere, Brianna, or is it working or no?
Leontine has been through a lot. She's a widow, and she's been through a lot of hurt in her life, and I think that she's really fearful. She's really fearful to let that love back in, even though it's been a long time.
How does it feel to be performing the work of somebody who has been ignored through a couple of centuries, who obviously is such a wild amount of talent, happens to be a black composer as well? What's that feel like?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I was really excited when BLO asked me to be a part of this. being a Black artist singing the music of a Black composer during Black History Month, I think really allows me to celebrate Black excellence in a way that I don't always get to. So it's wonderful.
So, Omar, or either of you actually, but I'll start with Omar. I was speaking before you came up about how opera can be a hard sell for some people. They don't think it's not in their wheelhouse, generally, especially if they're young. What are they missing?
Well, I mean, opera is such a vastly wide array of things. So I think the one thing I would say is whatever it is you are looking for in entertainment, there will be an opera that is for you. It might not be everyone, but for example, something I think a lot about in this piece, in The Anonymous Lover, is it is so fun. I think a lot of people think of opera and they think of tragic heroes and heroines and death and drama, and this is just, it's fun, it's heartfelt, it's very funny.
I like death and drama, speaking just for myself, by the way.
I mean, me too.
You do
also.
too. Yeah. I had a feeling. Well, that's how we met. Weren't you Romeo last time we met you?
Yes,
a while ago?
yes. And Brianna, how about you? I mean, is it just you have this unbelievable voice, and so it was the logical place for you to go, or how did opera happen for you?
So I went to a really incredible high school. I'm from Ohio. Went to a really incredible high school where music was very, very important. And I did a lot of different things while I was there. I was in all the choirs, I was in all the musicals, all the marching bands, all the bands. I did everything. And there is where I kind of found that I could live my life doing this. I could perform, I could sing in front of people, and I kind of went with that. Once I found out that I could major in singing, I was like, oh, okay, that's what I'll be doing.
And I read in the 23-24 season, you're going to be, I don't know if you've already done it, or you're going to do it soon, at Carnegie Hall?
Yeah, so that was in December of 2023.
What was that like?
It was wonderful. It was really great. It was a wonderful piece that I love a lot, and just kind of being in that space and hearing that name Carnegie Hall and walking on the stage, and I was like, oh wow, this is fine. I belong here. So yeah, it was amazing.
And now you've made it to the Boston Public Library, so it's sort of like complete, it's like an EGOT kind of thing.
Yeah.
What's it like performing together? We heard you before rehearsing at about 10:30 this morning. What's it like, the two of you doing this somewhere?
So we actually have kind of a long history together, mostly through BLO. Starting with the Handmaid's Tale back in what, 2018, 19? Yeah.
That's an upbeat thing.
Yeah. Well, and then we were Hamlet and Ophelia together. So it's really fun to visit these roles now. That is a very, very different kind of romantic relationship than we had before. And it's great to work with someone who I fundamentally trust and respect, and I feel like there's a mutuality through the work that we've done together.
Do you want to say something nice about him before you tell us what you're saying?
I mean, absolutely. Everything that Omar said, and then of course I really adore Omar's voice and his artistry and his musicality. It helps me in my own artistry.
What are you two performing for us here?
We are performing a duet with Valcourt and Leontine, and they are both trying to do different things. She's saying, please leave me alone. I need to be alone. I need to have this moment. And he is trying to get her to open up to him.
Great. Do you want to put your headsets down and walk over to your places? And we'll hear you perform together. Again, this is The Anonymous Lover, February 16th through the 18th. For more information, go to blo.org. And as we said, the pianist accompanying them is Ji Young Lee.
And perfect timing for Valentine's Day.
It is perfect timing for Valentine's
absolutely.
Day. Here they are.
Laissez-moi
Beautiful.
That was spectacular. We have been speaking and listening to the folks behind the Boston Lyric Opera's production of The Anonymous Lover. Great. The show runs for just 3 nights in February, right in time for Valentine's Day, Friday the 16th through Sunday the 18th at the Huntington Theater. For tickets and more information, go to blo.org. That's blo.org. Coming up after the noon news, Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor is tired, and let's be honest, with colleagues like hers, who can blame her? Nancy Gertner, retired federal judge, is going to be speaking with us next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio at the Boston Public Library.
we did agree on the economics. We were very close. Again, it was these couple fine points that we're trying to nail down, and kids will be back in school on Monday once we do that.
He is Jim Braude. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. Joining us here in red, by the way, I should say, which I think means something, at the Boston Public Library for another edition of On the Docket is Nancy Gertner. She's a retired federal judge and senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a regular BPR contributor. Judge Gertner, it's great to see you.
Good to be here.
So Judge Gertner, thank you very, very much for coming in. So the United States Supreme Court is going to be considering this case of knocking former President Trump off the ballot. What do you think is going to be happening here?
I want to
say... for being an insurrectionist, I should
say. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, just for being on the ballot. That would have been interesting.
Yeah.
I have no idea. On the one hand, there's a very extraordinary group of conservative scholars who say the Constitution means what it says, that, in fact, we have a robust history, post-Civil War, of knocking Confederate soldiers off the ballot. If they were to do that, on the one hand, you feel like it would be a sort of a get-out-of-jail-free card for the Supreme Court for the next 10, 15 years. In other words, if they act against type and actually disqualify him, it would certainly restore their legitimacy. And they can. The language certainly allows for that. Left scholars, right scholars, on the one hand. On the other hand, there are lots of ways of dodging it. Lots of technical ways of dodging it, lots of ways of dodging it. They could say it doesn't apply to a president. That would be really a bit of a stretch. It lists officers but doesn't include the president, and that really would be a stretch. They could say engaged in has to be a more direct, like being in the army of the Confederates. There are a number of things they could say. They could send it back down for litigation on some issue, which would essentially end it for this election. There are a lot of ways of getting out of it. So I wish I could say I knew, but I don't.
Yeah, well, I don't either, Judge Gertner, but I can't imagine. I've read as much about this as I could possibly read. And they're two pretty serious constitutional scholars. Your good buddy Larry Tribe and Judge Ludig, who used to be a darling of the conservatives before he former federal judge before he turned on Trump. But can you imagine a circumstance where the Supreme Court of the United States is willing to put itself in a position where they declare that a guy who is not only leading in the nomination process in his party, but is leading in a poll to be the next president of the United States would be disqualified in what is, at least for most people, not the experts, the experts too, is a 50-50 proposition?
No, I mean, it would be, classically, the Supreme Court and all courts stay out of political discussions. They have taken the case, however. I think they actually had to take the case. And you can argue, one would hope, that this is really, as we say in the law, sui generis, which is unique. In other words, this is a situation that's not going to happen again. I really don't know. I mean, I can see the path to disqualifying him. I can see the arguments for disqualifying him, whether or not, and I can see the impact on the court's legitimacy were they to disqualify him. But whether they would do it, I have no idea.
Do you have any, I mean, we had this discussion with you before, but since it's being argued before the Supreme Court next week, we can have it briefly one more time. Do you not have some concern that the word insurrection was not determined to apply to him by a congressional body, by a court of law, but a ballot commission or whatever they are, and then ultimately a court there, determined that he's an insurrectionist? Do you know, is that concern you?
Right. In other words, the language of the Constitution doesn't typically enforce itself.
Yeah.
It triggers, legislation that would enable it to be enforced, and so that is a problem. The problem is that post-Civil War, that's what happened. But then again, there was unmistakable clarity about who was in the Confederate Army and who wasn't. One can argue that this required findings. So no, that is true. That's another thing the court could do. The court could say that this provision doesn't enforce itself. Congress needs to come up with authorizing language, and that's not going to happen.
Well, I mean, it's not going to happen from Congress. It might happen from the Supreme Court.
Well, no, they could say...
there's no authorizing legislation.
That's right. And then turn the ball over to Congress, which is never going to do
anything.
So, Judge Gertner, we've asked you this before, too, but, I'm getting so nervous, and it's February. The D.C. Circuit has this issue of whether or not the president is immune because whether presidents can be immune from what they do when they are in office, and this is a big issue in terms of the January 6th Washington case, and of course Jack Smith, special prosecutor, would like to get this settled. What are they doing? I mean, it's February. The case is supposed to begin in March. It's not. But you certainly hope that this one at least gets decided before the election, or preferably even before the convention.
That it will be decided before the election and even before the convention is clear.
You think
Whether
so?
It will be decided in time to allow the January 6th prosecution to go forward before the election and before the convention. That's another
that's what I was talking about.
That's another question. I mean, I'm frankly surprised. The courts, the D.C. Circuit's decision to expedite it, to make it go faster than any other case, I think is the reason why the Supreme Court didn't take a direct review to it. Well, the Court of Appeals is doing enough to enhance this, and we don't have to go any further. So one expected a quick decision. Scholars who look at the issues say, of course, there is no immunity for crime here. So I don't know what's happening.
But it seems like it's almost a dereliction of duty, because this is a very important thing. I mean, you don't often have these cases involving presidents and elections. It would seem to me this is all they should be doing until they get through with this.
It may well be all they're doing. It may be that this is a reflection of a fight going on. So it may well be. I don't think it's that they're doing slip and fall cases rather than doing presidential immunity cases. I think that the issue is there's obviously a division in the court. What happens is that, at the end of an oral argument, there's a vote. The person who's in the majority writes the draft, circulates the draft. It may be that they're just, that they're battling over words, or there's a division in the court. Who knows? But that's the best explanation for the delay. But even that is surprising, since no constitutional scholar of any note believed that this was a controversial proposition. Remember the wonderful question that was asked by one of the justices, which is, could SEAL Team 6, can you order SEAL Team 6 to kill your political opponent? And Trump's lawyer waffled.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that it should have been an easy gift.
Just to understand, and even when the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals rules, whenever that is, the loser is going to appeal this to the Supreme Court of the United States, right?
Right. The loser would appeal. Well, there's another step. The loser would then appeal to the entire District of Columbia Circuit, and then the loser could go to the Supreme Court. But any stage, can be expedited. And in addition, the Supreme Court could grab it at that point.
Okay, so the trial in question was scheduled for March 4th. It's obviously not going to happen on March 4th. My understanding, and I forgot to look this up, so correct me if
Well, I'll make up an answer. You won't know one way or the
I'm
other.
making up a question. I think you got it backwards. So isn't there a tradition, I know it's not a statute, that the Justice Department doesn't proceed with things within X number of days of an election?
Yes.
Okay, so March 4th gets postponed. We're still waiting for this appellate court to rule. Then, as you say, it may go to the full appellate court after that. And obviously, Trump wants it to be stalled, so he'd appeal. Well, of course, if he wins, he won't appeal. But then it arguably goes to the Supreme Court of the United States. It's June, July, August. There's some point at which Merrick Garland says, we can't proceed with this because the election is starting in some it's not November anymore because there's so much advanced voting. I don't know when it's starting. Sometime in October, as early as August, the Justice Department may say, we're not going to prosecute this till after the election.
Again, there are means of sort of expediting this. If they came down with a decision next week, for example, the Supreme Court could grab the case, because that's what Trump had asked for initially, and bypass the full bench and make a decision. So there's expedition. In addition, the Department of Justice is a policy, not a law.
I understand that.
So Garland would have to struggle with a policy on the one hand versus very serious charges on the other. This isn't minor. So he could go forward. It would be difficult and chaotic, but he could go forward.
But I just want to be clear because I'm not sure I understand. There's no real person that could put pressure on the Supreme Court, so you got to do this.
No.
No. So
if there were, I would.
Okay. So given the makeup of the Supreme Court, we don't really know. I mean, I know it's obviously a conservative Supreme Court. I'm not sure that all of them are big fans of former President
They expedited
Trump.
almost everything in the last election cycle, didn't they?
Not only did they expedite it, I think there were 19 examples in which a decision was made in a district court or a court of appeals, and the Supreme Court grabbed it in situations that were far less serious than this.
So you think that they'll definitely do that?
I think that they can do that. If they don't do it, then we know that they're essentially trying to tank these issues.
Okay.
But they certainly could.
Okay. So poor, you feel bad for some people like Justice Sotomayor, who's kind of a liberal justice, and she's talked a lot about her frustration. We have some sound from the justice. She talked about her deep sadness over allowing that execution of a death row inmate by nitrogen gas the other day. It took the man quite some time to die. But in any case, here she is expressing her frustration with recent rulings from the Supreme Court, and she was talking to the law dean of the University of California in Berkeley on Monday.
Change happens because people care about moving the arc of the universe towards justice. And it can take time, and it can take frustration. I live in frustration. And as you heard, every loss truly traumatizes me in my stomach and in my heart. But I have to get up the next morning and keep on fighting.
I felt terrible for the justice.
Right.
This has taken years of her health away, it sounds like.
Well, that's the trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, by the way, obviously in a different setting, I'm assuming there are a lot of laws that you had to enforce and sentences you had to give that you didn't want to give, and laws you didn't want to enforce as a person, but as a judge, you had an obligation to. So I'm assuming you suffered through similar kind of experiences.
But in one sense, I don't want to say it was harder, it was just me. She can see an alternative argument among her colleagues, and they are not doing that. And that's got to be especially heartbreaking. And I think that what triggered this was also the execution, that she had to go forward. I mean, I didn't have anything like that. I had a death penalty case in which the man was acquitted. And I had to talk to myself because I had said to the Senate that if I had to, I would enforce the death penalty. If I couldn't, it was an unlikely outcome because there was no death penalty in Massachusetts. Then the federal death penalty. Federal death penalty came in 1994. I went on the bench in 1994. So all of a sudden, I got a death penalty case. He's one of the men I've actually interviewed.
Can we say what you're doing? You want to say that you're writing a book?
I'm writing a book about the men I sentenced, and I'm interviewing them and talking about sort of what I did, what I thought I could do, and then what their lives have been like, which has been incredibly difficult.
I don't want to spoil the work you're doing, which I can't wait to read. What's that experience been like, particularly with people who felt you sentenced them unfairly?
You know, in one sense, it's actually been amazing because almost all the people I have talked to recognize that I did more than they would have gotten from almost any other judge. So, you know, I've kidded around about this. Can you imagine calling someone? I'm actually seeing someone right after this show who I sentenced to, I think, 15 years because the guidelines were mandatory. And, you know, I'll say, hi, I'm Nancy Gertner. I sentenced you to 15 years. Can we have coffee? And they are incredibly open to this. That's in amazing. Part because they want to talk about what happened. So I appreciate what Sotomayor is saying. And as I said, you know, in one sense, the pain has got to be even worse for her because becoming a Supreme Court justice at her age had to have been, it's obviously the capstone of your career. And if you find yourself in a perennial minority, not just on some cases, but on virtually all cases you care about, that has got to be incredibly difficult.
We're talking to retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. Judge Gertner, you're quoted a lot in this piece by New York Times reporter Kate Cernke.
Former Globe
yes,
reporter.
About the possibility that women might be subjected to stricter scrutiny and criticism. And it takes off from the piece about the story that we all saw in Congress, the 3 women from Penn, from MIT, and from, of course, Claudine Gay from Harvard. I didn't know that the Cornell president was also a woman, was invited there, not the male presidents of like Yale or anything. So what did you have to say about this double standard for women in the judiciary and running places like Ivy League schools? Well, what struck me immediately is that one hallmark of discrimination is when a woman is subject to more scrutiny than a man would in a similar situation. So let's sort of do the counterfactual here. If Jim were the president of, Puba University and he screwed up before the Congress, just totally screwed up, there would have been lots of articles about how he screwed up. Would they go back and say, you're an affirmative action hire? They couldn't do that. Would they go back and look at your qualifications and say you shouldn't have been there? That's the debate that is the issue here. They went to that immediately from one end of the conservative press to the other, and that you only do for women, for minorities. So applying a degree of scrutiny to these women that you never applied to anyone else, and applying standards. I don't want to do this because I don't have time, but I'd love to go back to all the other Harvard presidents and see whether anyone had, other than Larry Summers, was the most fabulous scholar in the world, or whether they had administrative experience, as Gay did. In other words, are the standards different because there are women entrants in it? That's what I was trying to identify. And this
speaking of Summers, if I may, I've said this before here, Summers is the first person in high-profile fashion to criticize Gay, and at least I said on the air, at least my perception, I hardly know him, but is that if it had been a male president instead of Claudine Gay, my guess is he would have called him on the phone and said, you really screwed up.
Absolutely.
I think you should fix it, as opposed to going to the press and saying this was a disaster and an embarrassment to Harvard.
Well, but again, to go from you screwed up on this occasion to you shouldn't have gotten the job to you're an affirmative action hire is essentially a route that only a woman would have gotten and only a person of color would have gotten. And that's the hallmark of discrimination. Yeah. She quoted Ruth Simmons in this Kate Cernke piece in the New York Times, who was the former president of Smith and Brown and some Prairie View A&M. I've not heard of that. I guess that's in Texas. But she talked about kind of the double bind, that she was not only a woman, but she was a woman of color, so she had 2 big strikes. And then this goes on to point out how few women there are at the highest levels of academia, which I suppose there are a few women at the highest levels. Of everything. Of everything. Even though there are more women in law schools now, and there are more women in a lot of colleges now than men. So that's sort of interesting. One of the things that we talk about in the legal profession is that the law schools have been producing 50% women for about the past 20 years, actually. And yet the highest echelon of the firms are almost overwhelmingly male, and the highest echelons of government are almost 100% male. The court, the judges have changed. And as a result of Senator Warren and Senator Markey, the U.S. federal court, this is the court that I was on in Massachusetts, may well be a half to three-quarters women by the end of the Biden administration.
Oh, wow.
What percentage, when you were at Yale, what percentage of the class was women, roughly?
In the class that I joined was about 160 students, and there were 20 women. And the year before, there were 8.
8 women.
There were 8, and the only reason it went to 20 was because of the Vietnam War. You know, we were the second level because they couldn't get men, involved. But I mean, I can't express this enough. I mean, there may have been issues with respect to Claudine Gay. I think they have been overblown. But the issue is that the inquiry would not have happened to a man.
Well, you know what I loved is a quote from Larry Summers in this piece saying, "You have to be kind of an a-hole to be president of Harvard." And I thought to myself,
that's from a few years ago, by the way. To put it
2017.
In some context.
It was when they're looking to go out and replace Drill Gilpin Faust.
Because he wanted to describe his own qualifications.
Well, I thought how unreflective that was, because that may be true for a male president, but it sure as heck is not true. A woman who was an a-hole would be out in about a day.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, we've seen that with respect to Hillary. We've seen, that is to say, the sort of double standard. I certainly felt that as a litigator. When I went into court, there were a range of styles and positions I could take. And I knew what that range was, and I played in that range. But there were other things I couldn't be and couldn't do. And I think every woman leader, that's what we all have to find out about.
You know, Nancy Gertner, before you go, there's a group...
Am I leaving? I thought I was staying all day. No.
There's a group that I had not heard of until a couple days ago, something called Stand Up America, and one of their agenda items is they're trying to do get term limits in place for the Supreme Court. We've had this discussion with you. You and Larry Tribe were on the Presidential Commission on the Supreme Court, and for the 4,000th time I've said this, you both went in supporting term limits, correct me if I'm wrong, and came out suggesting that term limits maybe was not the answer, but expansion was. And if I remember correctly, it's because term limits you believe would require constitutional change.
Right.
And we know that expansion would not, because the court's been expanded or contracted, 9 times or something in our history. Neither of these reforms is going anywhere with anybody. Is that correct?
No question about it. But I mean, the advantage of the White House Commission report is that
the thing you were on.
That the commission that I was on is that Biden wanted to have a discussion of the problems with the Supreme Court in a much more deliberative setting than a political campaign, and I think we did that. And the bottom line is we have the most powerful, totally unaccountable Supreme Court of any high court in any Western democracy. It takes the cases it wants. It does what it wants to do. It does not have an enforceable code of ethics. One of the articles that I looked at for today was, it's overturning precedent, and Adam Liptak wrote an article saying it was no more than any other court. I was enraged. New
York Times, yeah.
I was enraged at that article.
Why?
Because the precedent that they're, a lot of people who sort of quantify what courts do without looking at the content, it is the nature of the precedents they're overturning, which are, country-changing precedents, the relationship.
Dobbs, affirmative action in higher ed, that sort of thing. And
abortion, et cetera. I mean, it's not sort of some technical issue.
One last quick thing I mentioned. We all saw the E. Jean Carroll case last week, where she ended up with getting $83 million more than she for the second defamation trial, and the first one confirmed that the former president was liable for sexual assault and for defamation. I just wonder, you've been a lawyer, you've been a judge. We had Lewis Kaplan, who was the judge in that case. We had a very unusual lawyer, Alina Habba, if that's how you say it, who was the president's lawyer. What do you think of the goings-on in that?
Well, first, I have an op-ed that is swirling around in my head about when lawyers lie, and it's about Habba. So Kaplan had to deal with, it was an extraordinary situation. Trump had effectively not defended the accusations of sexual assault. He didn't appear. He effectively didn't do it. And so once the verdict came in that he had done what E. Jean Carroll said he had done to her, and all that was left was damages, there was nothing much to litigate but her pain. And so Habba got in front of the TV cameras and said, hey, they didn't let us do this trial. They didn't of course, because you had your opportunity to do that, and you did nothing. So, Kaplan had it was not an easy not an easy situation, because the other thing that happened in this trial was that Trump was baiting him.
Yes.
Trump was baiting him. He wanted to be held in contempt. He wanted to be excluded. And Kaplan certainly could have done that. But had he done that, the trial would have been about that rather than A.G. and Carroll. So he had to walk a thin line, and I thought he did a great job.
You know what Trump's position is now? He never met the lawyer. He doesn't even know she is. He literally, but he is, that's part of it. He is interviewing an appellate team that does not include the lawyer who represented him in the trial for very good reason, I should say.
Oh, yeah. No. Getting out there, I really do want to say everything she said was not true, because he was not allowed to do it in this case because he had given up the opportunity to do it in the earlier case.
But have you ever seen a person in Trump's position, I guess you'd call him the defendant, right? Right. Even if it's a civil case.
You can call him many things.
You call him a defendant because he was a defendant.
I wasn't sure in a civil case.
No, he's a defendant.
But anyway, he's muttering under his breath, making all these noises. That's
shocking.
Highly unusual, and in a normal situation.
Walking out of the courtroom while the lawyer for the plaintiff is doing her closing argument.
If he were Joe Schmo instead of the former president,
he would have been held in contempt.
He would have been held in contempt.
That's the other theme of all of this. When Trump says that the justice system is being weaponized against him, actually it's the reverse. He's getting away with stuff that some poor African American defendant who did that in the middle of a criminal case would never get away with.
And when you say held in contempt, he might even have been put in the jail.
Right. There's a you go up the line here. You warn him. You then you sanction him in terms of money. You might say, if you continue doing that, here are the fines that would apply. And then you could in fact exclude him from the courtroom, which you can do more easily in a civil case because his attendance is not constitutionally required.
Well, great week for the judicial system on
nice
parade
to see you,
in the
Judge
United
Gertner.
States
We
of
really
America.
appreciate your time.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Nancy Gertner is a retired federal judge, a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School, and a regular BPR contributor. Thank you again, Judge Gertner. Coming up after a quick break, GBH's Jared Bowen. You know him from those colorful billboards on the highway advertising the culture show. That is a big deal. But he's going to talk to us about some other cultural matters. Up next, Jared Bowen is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. Joined now by Jared Bowen. Jared is GBH News Executive Arts Editor and host of The Culture Show. You may have heard of it. It airs daily, every single day here on 89.7. Hello, Jared.
Great to be with you.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
Hello, Jared Bowen. What is this about the length of pop songs now? That should we be concerned about this, or what's going on?
Well, I think we should be concerned. I think we should. We should be concerned about our attention spans because, like everything, we can't seem to pay attention. So the average length of pop songs is now shrunk to under 3 minutes. So if you look at the 1980s and into the early 1990s, the average time of a pop song was about 4 minutes and 21 seconds. But now it's under 3. And there was just this piece about this in the Washington Post, and they think it's tied to technology. I think it's also tied to our attention spans.
So do I.
If you look at how much TV shows have also shrunk, even theater to some degree.
Really?
Yeah, I remember the other night I was sitting down to watch a show and I thought, oh, it's 55 minutes. How will I deal with this? Because you're so used to shows 40 minutes or something, and then you binge 3 hours later and you're still watching television. But the songs are kind of tied to a few different things, and one is royalties for Spotify. So you have to listen 30 seconds before an artist will get royalties to their song, which means you have to tighten up the song and get to the hooky part sooner. And it's also about TikTok, because you want to have your again, the heart of the song, the catchy part of the song kind of truncated and all together so that people can now use it for TikTok. Actually, I was just talking to Brian Bell, producer on The Culture Show. He was telling me that his son, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, finds most of his music now by TikTok and through gaming. So songwriters, even Taylor Swift, who about 10 years ago, her songs were 4 minutes, now 3 minutes, they're all starting to conform to these new norms.
Wow. You know who had really short songs, though? Early in their, the Beatles.
That was only 50 years ago.
It was 50 years ago. I'm dating myself, but I always notice when I have their Beatles #1, thing that it's a compilation of all the #1 songs. They're all short.
Except for Hey Jude, which was about 7 minutes.
Well, there are others who were...
Well, they got longer, I think, as their career went on.
Because
Did
they
they not?
could.
They could, yep.
And they could kind of withstand the industry. That was the other interesting thing, is when you were making records with like the Beatles and the 50s and 60s, you could only have short songs because you could only have so much space on which to put your songs. But then when CDs and cassettes came, there was more opportunity to go longer.
Well, that's totally uninteresting to me, but it is what it is. No, I mean, obviously, I don't mean you. I mean the subject matter. So do you have anything insightful to say about the Grammys? Speaking of, it's Sunday night, correct? Trevor Noah, who we both love. Do you love Trevor Noah? Do you like Trevor Noah?
I miss him very much.
Love Trevor
he
Noah.
wrote a great book about growing up in South Africa, too. It was terrific.
Okay, so you have any insight into the Grammys? You want to say anything?
No, I'm just a bit excited. I don't love award shows. I actually...
You don't? You don't love seeing the stars when they're doing their thing?
I don't, because it just all became too polished. However, the Grammys I love, because I think the Grammys programming is so brilliant for how they mix the new and the old.
That's my favorite. It's when they have people sing. You know, by the way, speaking of that, I'm going to not think of the guy's name and everybody's going to be pissed off at me. The fabulous song that was #1 in the country charts, Tracy Chapman's song.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the whole issue was, how did she feel about him singing her song? What's his name? No one knows.
I can't remember.
What's his name? What's the country singer who's singing the Tracy Chapman song? Luke Combs, thank you very much. I think that was Zoe. They're singing it together at the thing. How great is that?
It's fabulous. And those partnerships are, it makes you feel the sense of community when they do that. And then the spectacle is always great, too, for those shows. I always love the opening number. What are they going to do? And
I'm into it, too.
Fun.
So that's Sunday night, in any case. So there is a book. I have to say, if you had said to me, do you want to read a book about art galleries? I would say waterboarding will come first. This book by Bianca Bosker, who I never heard of, sounds so spectacular. We got to try to get her. I'm assuming you're trying to get her, too.
Well, she won't be going to any more gallery openings, so she'll have plenty of free time.
Tell us about her and her book, Get the Picture.
So this book comes out on February 6th, and she has really integrated herself last few years into the art world, working at art galleries, and this really is about the commercial art world, less so about museums, although I think from some of the things I've read, she tries to take down museums a little bit too, but it's really about, frankly, what I've discussed here too, which is kind of the disgustingness of the commercial art world, especially in New York. One of the anecdotes I love already is there is a big art gallery called Gagosian. And
this is great. This is great. Go ahead.
She learned that there was a very specific pronunciation of Gagosian that people had to have as they answered the phone, and that was sort of, you had to bring the name down at the end, Gagosian, so that you didn't sound happy, because God forbid you should be a happy person in a New York art gallery.
That's right.
You just have to be sad and miserable and sell your work for millions and millions of dollars. And so that's basically the tone of this book, is how insidious some of the New York art world is at that upper echelon level. And she also talks about the art fairs like Art Basel, Miami, where you have the same
You've been there.
thing.
You've talked to us about that.
I have. And the problem is, I think that Art Basel, Miami, for people who don't know, is this major contemporary art fair. It's comparable to Art Basel in Switzerland, again, another contemporary art fair. But it became this big celebrity haven and all about the money that exchanged and who's buying what. And it's a lot of hedge fund people just buying art so they can put it into storage. And then later, it's an investment, essentially. However, there are these great satellite fairs where real artists are making work and it's being sold and it's actually accessible and you can buy it and you can see it and you can appreciate it. But that's been overshadowed by just the kind of gross nature of the upper end.
I don't know if you said this at the beginning. She embedded herself in that world. She got jobs, low-level jobs.
That's how she learned.
Well, they talk about, though, how only rich kids with family money can afford the low-level jobs because they are so low-level you can't afford to be there. Yeah. They talk about how there's something called this Art Dealers Association of America has 176 members. One is African-American. They talk about how their theory is you only want to sell to quote-unquote good persons, which means white people with friends at powerful institutions, because you don't want Joe Schmo, whether he's from a hedge fund or a private equity firm or not, to stick the painting in his storage in his bedroom or something like that. They don't like, they're not pleased about black art, queer art.
Well, no, this is what's interesting is they are pleased about that. And
they are pleased. I'm sorry, I had it backwards.
They want to sell that work and they want to show people that they are embracing that work, but it's not necessarily the people who are creating that work that they want to sell it back to.
Right.
That's the problem.
This reminded me a lot of that The Devil Wears Prada about Anna
That's
Wintour,
a great analogy.
who still runs Condé Nast Vogue magazine, and how ridiculous, every little petal of every flower had to be absolutely perfect. But you can see it, how you go. I was telling Jim a funny story. When I was young, I had a friend that was Peter Kazis, actually, whose girlfriend used to work in this art world, and we would go to these galleries, and Mary Boone Gallery.
In New York, right?
In New York. And no matter what you wore, did you feel like the biggest Okie from Muskogee coming in? I always wore all black, because you figured all black, how far wrong could you go? But no matter how much black you had on, you just stuck like a sore thumb, and the people were just so, they were so snobby walking around, and they all talked in a certain way, and they didn't they didn't like the nouveau riche thing. They wanted people, preferably you came over in the Mayflower, was the impression I got, and it was just very intimidating to a regular person.
Well, and from what she's writing in this book, that's all by design too. By the way, I think the wardrobe is simple. You just black, chunky jewelry, and big glasses, big statement glasses, and that gets you in the door, and nobody will know who you are.
The author is Bianca Bosker, and the book is Get the Picture, and you said it's out in a couple of days in early February.
By the way, what is your deal now? She's not going to be able to be infiltrating anything from now on.
Well, I think, there'll be a lot of vetting for her, but probably after the book, she won't need to do this anymore, or she'll move on to something else.
Doesn't she work for The Atlantic? am I right about that?
She is an Atlantic writer. In fact, she just wrote a piece for The Atlantic about being a guard in a museum as well, and that experience, and that was a little different, though. That was just more about her understanding of what it was like to be in an art museum and how people engage with art, and especially around labels, how it's better when you actually don't have labels.
Okay, so let's come home. What's the Wonder Museum?
So the Wonder Museum just opened here in Boston. It's a commercial endeavor, but they've added the name museum to it. And this is all built around technology. In fact, it opened just down the street from where the clowns are now wedged.
Oh, I went to see them 2 days ago.
What did you think of the clowns?
It is spectacular. It is so
fun, right?
clever that they did this. It's right on Washington Street.
Washington
and Lafayette, right where Lafayette.
Exactly.
It's fabulous. It's brilliant. I loved it. But go ahead. These are the inflatable clown heads. I'm sure you've seen the photographs. Go ahead.
So there's been a long vacant space next to Macy's, and that's where they've moved the Wonder Museum in. They have spaces in San Diego and also in Chicago. But again, they're really bringing technology to the fore here. So they have a few artists. There's one, Lee Satchwitz, who's a Scottish artist. Who's working in Germany now, but she had these memories of what it was like to be in her grandmother's home in Scotland with the weather just kind of sweeping up through the highlands, I guess, and lightning and rain, and so thunderous that it would blow open windows and doors. So you go into this structure that she's created, and this 3-minute storm happens around you with lights and sounds.
So it's like an immersive kind of deal?
But absolutely. All through technology. They have this floor that you walk on that's responding to you at all times. So there's a lot of, I don't know if you could consider it AI, although I think there is some AI, but all manner of things, including a Yayoi Kusama infinity room.
Really?
That they have here as well.
This sounds really neat.
Have you ever been in a Kusama infinity room?
No, didn't you do it?
I did in Seattle, because he got me into the museum by lying about who I was or some such thing. In any case, we have some sound. GBH's Catherine Hurley, she a colleague of yours?
No.
Oops. Okay, speaking with Wonder Boston's general manager, Marcos Doyle, about that woman's, Lee, how do you say the name? Satchwich's exhibit, Inside Out. Here it is.
It's a place of complete immersion and wonderment.
Here, visitors control the skies without ever going outside.
And then all of a sudden the storm has cleared, and slowly the light returns, and it's like sunrise over the hills. And it's the most serene feeling at the end of that wild storm.
I have no idea what they're talking about, but no, I'm serious. It sounds, oh, you've been there. It sounds fabulous.
It was a really interesting experience, especially since for museum-wide, they're really trying to capture all senses. So it is oral, it's sound, it's smell. It's obviously sight, to make it very, very experiential.
Isn't it because, by the way, when I was in Seattle, admittedly, there were a number of the Infinity Rooms, and the line was like literally thousands of people around is this not the same kind of deal here?
It is. I went very early before they opened one day to be able to experience it. It's called Let's Survive Forever, by the way, and this one there's a lot of light in it, more than I've experienced before, and lots of silver orbs hanging through, and because they're called Infinity Mirror Rooms, because you can kind of see into infinity with the way she plays with light and reflective surfaces, and it was, as always, they're very dazzling experiences.
So two last quick things. This is there, so you don't have to worry about getting. It's not on display for a certain amount of time.
It's okay. I'm not sure it'll be there permanently. I guess it's on loan from the owner. But
okay, that's number one. And number two, how does it feel when you're in an immersive storm? What does that feel? What is that like?
It's very evocative, I have to say, even though it's done through light and sound. They hadn't turned the haze on because they were having a fire inspection the day, because this is just opening this week. But this is the power of art, to realize what you can do with light and visuals to make it suggestive. It's very transportive, especially when the light goes out all around you and you're just in this structure.
So you feel like you are in the middle of some massive storm.
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
By the way, it's WNDR is Wonder, in case you're looking it up and try to go to this thing. So do you want to do Trouble in Mind or A Case for Their Existence? I'm worried we might run out of time. What do you want to do first?
Let's do Trouble in Mind, because it's only open through February 4th.
Let's do it. Trouble in Mind, Lyric Stage.
This is actually playing right around the corner at Lyric Stage Company, and this sets us down in 1957, and we find a group of black actors coming together to rehearse a play for Broadway, and including Willetta Mayer. She's played beautifully by Patrice Jean-Baptiste, and she is an actor who is looking forward to having this opportunity to have her play on Broadway. Not her play, but the play she'll be in on Broadway, and it's a story about a white community that wants to bring an end to lynchings based on a lynching that has recently happened. However, this play is directed and written by white men, and they have, even though they believe they're progressive, they have very clear, you could argue, racist thoughts about how this should be portrayed. And as somebody who has had a career this character has had in playing maids and mammies, she finally finds a conviction in herself to stand up and say that she's not going to take this point of view anymore, to come into her own. What is most interesting about this, other than this being really well rendered, is the fact that this play was actually written in 1955. And it was written by Alice Childress. And she was writing about her own experiences in theater at that time, in New York at that time. She had been an actor as well. Also, kind of aligning with the trajectory of this play, and so much of what we're talking about now, is the fact that she, at one point, did have the opportunity to have Trouble in Mind on Broadway, but the white theater makers wanted her to change her ending to make it happier and more palatable and less true. And she didn't allow it to go to Broadway because she wouldn't make the endings. If she had, she would have beaten Lorraine Hansberry to actually be the first African-American woman to have a play on Broadway.
Wow.
When was that, like the late 50s?
Yeah.
So this was 1955 when she wrote it. So it was in the 50s where this conflict
And
happened.
Raising the Sun was like in the late 50s, I think, early 60s, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then it kind of went into history until a few years ago when Roundabout Theater in New York resurrected it, and it finally made its appearance on Broadway, but that was 2021.
You know what it sounds like to me, not having seen either yet, sounds like American Fiction 70 years ago.
Exactly.
Is it not? I mean, there's a piece of that, right?
I mean, you walk into this play, if you don't know the history, you think this is a sharp contemporary piece trying to look at our time through 60 years ago, and you realize that no, this was written 60 years ago and nothing has changed.
Okay, we do have time for a case for
the existence of God.
Yeah.
Is he there or isn't he?
Well, I won't answer that question for you, but I will say this is a really, really, really excellent show. It's at Speakeasy Stage Company now through February 17th. It's a two-hander, just two actors. So the lights come up and we find ourselves in
Case for the Existence of God.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And we find ourselves in a fluorescent fluorescent lit cubicle, and we have two men. There's Ryan, he's a straight white guy, yogurt plant worker. This is in Twin Falls, Idaho, and he's speaking with the mortgage broker Keith, a gay black guy. And when you see these two men come together, I think because of so much of what we see in media and the way these characters are portrayed, you expect there's going to be some epic clash. How could these two men possibly come together without that happening? But it doesn't, and this is the beauty of it. Even without this major explosive drama, you see these two men coming together and forging a relationship. There's a push and pull because, of course, they're different people, different backgrounds, different modes of life. Ryan is struggling with the fact that he can't find financial security. He has to turn himself over to this mortgage broker. The mortgage broker is trying to be a single gay dad, trying to adopt a child. Ryan also has a child of the same age, but he's getting a divorce, so they find commonality there. And these two men come together in these beautiful performances by DeLon Grant and Jesse Hinson, and directed by Melinda Lopez. Really, really, really fabulous. It's also written by Samuel Hunter, who wrote The Whale, which recently became that film. Programming note, he'll be on the Culture Show on Monday, so I can't wait to talk to him about crafting these characters.
Speaking of the Culture Show, now that you have 2.5 hours, I hadn't thought of this till just now. Now that you have 2.5 hours a week as opposed to a half hour, do people in the industry treat you differently when they know the opportunities are greater? Do you know what I mean?
No.
Well, I mean,
do they harass you to get on the show?
Are you harassed more by people who want you are?
Yep.
That's good, though,
It's
right?
good.
It
It's
feels great, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm serious.
Everyone loves to be harassed,
Maybe it's not good
Jim.
for them, but it's good for you.
Well, the good thing is there's so much happening.
Oh, it's 5 hours,
arts
not 2.5 hours. What am I
Yeah.
talking about? It's 5 hours as opposed to 30 minutes.
I couldn't do the math.
10 times as long. 10 times as much airtime.
I think, honestly, I think that was my biggest fear when we started the show is can we fill this much time to have 5 hours, especially coming off of...
I was worried about it too, by the way.
You never told me that.
I've never told you, but I am stunned by how incredibly exciting. I'm serious. The lineups are incredible every single damn day. You and Chelsea and your whole team and your co-hosts, and it's just incredible.
But there is, when you think about it, I mean, I've learned from you, incredible amount of art, culture, theater, movies, museums, I mean, everything, right?
The worst part of my job is how often we have to say no. Because there is so much going on that we can't possibly cover everything. So it's a great problem to have, and it's also the worst problem to have.
Okay, so what are you doing on the, the culture show this afternoon?
Did you know that they're trying to rebuild one of the pyramids in Egypt?
No.
Yeah.
Why? It's falling apart?
No.
What is
Why?
We'll find out at 2 o'clock on the Culture Show.
Oh, do it, Callie.
I hate this.
These little teasers.
Give us a little something here. Why are
Okay.
they trying to rebuild the damn pyramid? What's the deal?
You'll find out more.
Give us a little
But nobody
something.
knows this. Isn't this?
Is this the one with
unbelievable.
Is the one with King Tut in it, or is it a different one?
King Tut is in Luxor.
Oh, Luxor. So's what I know.
They moved him out a long time
They
ago.
did?
They did?
So he's
Lose
not,
to me.
I didn't know.
I was looking for him, by the way. That's why I couldn't find him.
So the
apparently.
three ones that are there,
Yeah.
who's in them?
Well, I don't think anybody's left in them anymore. But no, there is a team.
Because the grave robbers, you mean? They've taken them all out?
Yeah, well, the Valley of the Kings is where they, and the Queen.
Wait, I don't care about
where-
this.
okay.
Give us a second, a little more of a tease.
So
of what,
Egypt has taken it upon themselves to decide that they want to recreate the look of the pyramids.
Oh.
So that's as much as I'll give you.
Wow.
Okay. I thought there was mold or something like that.
Yeah, we should
No?
all be talking about it.
Yeah.
No.
I guess there would
No
be mold
mold,
there.
not in
would
the
there?
desert.
Not in the
No.
desert. Okay. Thank you very much.
That's at 2 o'clock, by the way. Do you know that?
Yeah.
Good thing you told me that,
I gotta
because
go.
I was heading over to see King Tut. I would have gone to the wrong place.
You ever been to the pyramids, by the way?
I have.
And how incredible is that?
Really incredible. Actually, it's funny that we just said that about Bowl because it is kind of humid and musty inside.
Really?
You can walk inside.
Well, it is
at least
musty,
one of
when
them.
there's a dead body in there, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But by now, I guess it's pretty much disintegrated.
Yeah.
They were a while ago, those kids.
It was a
Those
long time.
pharaohs.
All good points, Marjorie. Excellent analysis.
Thank you.
And as I said, they put them in Luxor anyway.
Okay.
You should have Marjorie on for that segment because this
Hey,
woman really
I know
knows
a
her
lot
stuff.
about the pyramids, let me tell you.
Wow.
Okay, all those pharaohs.
Okay.
They were wild and crazy
They
guys.
really were.
King Tut.
Nice
Thank
to see you, Jared Bowen. Let's
Thank
hear
you
from
very
Jared
much.
Bowen.
We're
Yeah,
speaking
there he
with
is.
Jared Bowen, GBH News Executive Arts Editor
Talking
and
about the
host
pyramids.
of The Culture Show, which airs daily at 2 o'clock right here on 89.7. And if you want to hear about why they're rebuilding this pyramid, he is your man from
By the way,
232.
I always give you short shrift. Jamie just said, he typed for me, Marjorie Egan, Egyptologist.
That's correct.
That's how people who know her see her.
And a little bit later, we're going to be talking about the Sahara Desert.
We are.
And that was,
That is pretty incredible. It's a Nova film about whales walking on land. I mean, really?
I got out my geography book and everything else to figure out exactly where I was. Okay, thank you very much, Jared Bowen. You're listening to, I said 2 to 3. Culture Show. That's Jared Bowen Show. It's right after us at 2 o'clock. After a quick break, we're going to talk with UMass Boston Chancellor Marcelo Suarez Orozco about this partnership with the city of Boston to bring.
I think it's really exciting.
This is really neat. Holistic learning to the schools in Boston. He's also going to talk about the mess at the border and the bill that seems to be going nowhere about that. He's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming it online at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. Joining us now, looking insanely dapper, I should say, is Marcelo. We're pretty superficial on the show, my friend. Marcelo Suarez Orozco. He is the Chancellor of UMass Boston. It's great to see you, Chancellor.
Thank you. So wonderful to be back.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here. So we want to talk to you about this crisis at the border. But before we do, Jim mentioned this very exciting project that Mayor Wu just announced. We're going to play a little sound of the mayor announcing the city's first university-assisted community hub school. And she said this at the State of the Union address, which was last month.
UMass Boston has signed an agreement with BPS to make the BCLA McCormick High School our district's first university-assisted community hub school. Together, we'll give our high school students direct access to college coursework and resources, partner educators from both institutions, and create a seamless pathway into UMass Boston for our graduates.
This sounds terrific. Tell us what's going to happen.
Thank you. What will happen is UMass Boston will step up in a all-hands-on-deck approach to assist, beginning with BCLA McCormick, public higher education in our city do a better job by connecting our faculty to the school, by bringing a new level of engagement to even the playfield in K-12 education. This is part of a new movement. We were at the forefront of this at UCLA. I was a dean for a decade, and my responsibility was to grow the network of K-12 university-assisted schools in the most underserved communities in Los Angeles.
How successful was that? How did it go in LA?
This is a demographic in South LA, Pico Union, Koreatown, where roughly 30% of the kids go to college. We move the needle to an over 90% college-going rate for the kids in the complex that we manage.
So could you explain? You explained the sort of the broad outlines. Give a real world everyday.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Does it mean tutoring?
Yeah.
Does it mean
what
help
do you
with
actually
math?
do? Yeah.
Yeah. So it is. It's all of the above. Is professional development. Is tutoring. Is deploying the very significant resources of our public research university here in the city of Boston, so that the teachers, the staff, the leadership of the school, the parents have the tools to really reimagine and re-engineer what is a high school look in the 21st century. Bringing resources, bringing the resources of the Manning College of Nursing and Health Sciences, bringing resources from the College of Education and Human Development. This endeavor is gaining traction as public universities take more, a more active role and more responsibility for serving the communities that support the university.
Well, you know, you think about a high school, a big high school in a place that doesn't have a lot of money, where a lot of kids don't have parents who went to college, or maybe they're first generation or something. They've got, you know, one guidance counselor for 500 kids. How are you supposed to know? How are you supposed to navigate or get mentored and all these things? I mean, it seems to me this could be just a game changer to have these kids that are sophomores, juniors, and seniors get some real intensive help in that regard. I think it'd be great.
Yeah. So the idea, Marjorie, is for the kids to begin to develop just the habits and the cognitive model that they can go to college, that their local college here are extraordinarily diverse and excellent faculty. They see themselves in our faculty, and they see the pathways to a college career at a time when we live in the cognitive era. We live in the era where the economy will increasingly require higher order cognitive and metacognitive skills that our schools today, public schools in urban settings, are just not doing the job they need to be doing. Supporting the teachers, bringing dignity, bringing professionalism, bringing a new sense of purpose to our teaching partners is fundamental. So this is a movement in public higher education. UCLA was at the forefront of this, and I had the tremendous responsibility to lead the endeavor. We brought Mary Skipper, our superintendent.
Oh, that's right.
We brought the mayor's senior folk in K-12 education. We brought the commissioner, Noe Ortega. We brought members of the board of education to LA to do a learning tour of how that university developed its considerable resources to serve the most underserved schools in South Los Angeles, Pico Union, Koreatown. These are demographics that tell the story of the next America. These are the children of immigrants. These are the children of refugees. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in immigration. This is what can be done when rationally, with heart, with data, you mobilize to support the only demographic now growing in our city, which are children growing up in immigrant origin families. So it has enormous potential, and we're very, very proud, and we're very, very excited about working in partnership with BCLA McCormack to begin this journey.
Let's stay on this just for a second before we get to one of your other areas of expertise, immigration. You said several times, Chancellor, public university. I don't understand why, and we've been talking about this, we don't know anything about education for a couple of decades. Payments in lieu of taxation. are what universities, private universities, generally use to screw their communities. They basically, instead of paying property taxes, they're property tax exempt, and more often than not, with some limited exceptions, the payment they make in lieu of taxation is far below the level that they'd be taxed if they owned my home or they owned a business down the street in Cambridge or Boston or whatever. Why aren't private universities, as part of the community benefits that they give in lieu of taxation, expected to do the exact same thing that you're about to do with McCormick and UMass Boston?
So, Jim, here, I'll break the news. Here, I invite the presidents of our
private
research universities in Boston, across the river, to join us in this very noble endeavor of connecting with and moving the needle in a domain that is so significant to the future of our democracy now and moving forward.
And the goal, last thing I'll say, is the goal, I assume, and I assume is what happened in LA, is if this works, it's replicated. Not only does UMass expand its reach, but I assume, as you say, you invite in other universities to, I know you don't use the word adopt, but to work with other public schools in the city and beyond. Great. We're talking to the Chancellor of UMass Boston, Marcela Suarez Orozco. Please keep us up to speed on this. We're really interested. We're really interested.
So we've all been hearing all week long about how President Biden is concerned about getting money to Ukraine, and there are members of Congress who said no deal on the border, no money for Ukraine. Now apparently there's a deal on the border. We don't know all the details of the deal on the border, but apparently it's not going to happen. People say it's terrible. Trump says it's terrible. Other people say it's the best thing we've done since the 1980s. So what can you tell us about this whole situation?
Thank you, Marjorie. Because the devil is in the details here, it's difficult to sort of read what might be coming our way. But look, the last time we have a comprehensive approach to immigration, an approach worthy of us as a country of immigrants, is when a local Boston politician, Tip O'Neill, made a deal with Ronald Reagan. In 1986, that was a moment in our history in managing and benefiting from immigration that we saw consensus. We saw the two parties coming together with a common vision, a common plan. What we now have is something akin to, you know, what the great Borges said about the war in the South Atlantic between the United Kingdom and Argentina over the Falkland Islands. He said, these are two bald men fighting over a comb. What we have here with the two parties is they're like two bald men fighting just over a comb, and the plans are somewhat disappointing in that they fail to address the new drivers of migration in the world today. I think that we are trying to get in front of an existential issue, a humanistic issue, a political issue, with an architecture that is entirely irrelevant. There's a new reality unfolding in the world. The new drivers of mass migration include climate change, include dystopic states that have no capacity to serve their people. Most people on Earth, if they have their way, do not choose to migrate. Over 100 years, over a period of 100 years, it's been very, very stable. About 3% of the world's population will choose to migrate. And in our country, we have enormous benefits. I mean, this is our city. This is a city that was built by immigrants, by voluntary immigrants, involuntary immigrants, by waves and waves, beginning with Europe, the movement of enslaved Africans, the new movements from Asia, from the Pacific, the new dynamics from the Caribbean, from Africa, from Latin America. And we don't have a seriousness of purpose that aligns with the reality of what is going on in the world today. So it's very sad. It's fighting over a comb when you're not going to use it.
You know, Chancellor, I have to say, I haven't heard this analysis of this deal. I mean, one of the problems with there's a political motivation obviously, for Joe Biden to buy this and take this issue away from Republicans who are bludgeoning with it, including Donald Trump, and we've discussed ad nauseum, obviously, why Trump doesn't like a deal. But one of the, and there, even things that are as low-hanging fruit, an expression I hate, I don't know why I used it, things like dreamers is not even in this deal, meaning the people who are, let's say, more humane than others didn't get much in this thing. However, here's why I support even a crappy deal, which it sounds like it's going to be, is because my sense is if the American people believe its government actually is doing something about an issue that they're concerned about, the antipathy that so many of our neighbors direct at newcomers to our country may be muted a little bit more. Is that naive in your estimation?
No, I think that, look, we're a country where immigration is our history, it's our destiny. The only sector of the population now growing are kids growing up in immigrant origin homes.
We should say in Boston, by the way, almost 100% of the growth in the city in the last 20 years is the Latino population.
So this is, now, what we know is immigration, and in our beloved city included, we love immigrants looking backwards. In the here and now, there's always a panic, moral panic. Economic panic, societal panic. This was true 150 years ago when it was the Irish and the Italians and the Eastern European Jews that were coming to our country in significant numbers. The same, the grammar of the narrative is identical. Different players, same theme. They'll never adapt. They'll never learn our language. They'll never become proud practitioners of democratic citizenship that is so fundamental.
They're not like us.
They're not like us. But what happens is they become like us. The data on this are so clear. The National Research Council just released a study to end all studies. Immigrants connect to the labor market. They bring added value into their connectivity with the economy and with the society. Their children are learning English faster, by the way, than the children of Italian and Japanese and German immigrants of 100 and 150 years ago. They are marrying outside their group, so if you're concerned about kind of an ethnic closure here, segregation, it's not true. By the second generation, most Asian Americans, most Latino Americans marry outside their group. So the machinery works. The machinery continues to generate folk that identify with the U.S., learn the language, believe in the project of democracy, because many of us, myself included, leave very, very authoritarian countries that don't have the oxygen that creates the freedom and the energy that our country still generates.
So while you're here, we're all over the place, but we spoke to Nancy Gertner, former retired judge, about a piece in the New York Times about the gender aspect of going after the McGills and the gays, et cetera. You're running an institution. Claudine Gay used to run an institution across the river. What was your takeaway from that month or so of travail?
Yeah, I think the judge and others have noted that it can't be a statistical chance that three leading women academics, the former president of Harvard, the former president of Penn, the current president of MIT, were selected and
by Congress
to testify, and were subjected to such venomous treatment.
But and I agree with that. It was venomous, and the response was pathetically weak. I assume you would agree too. So where does that leave you?
It leaves me very happy that I am the chancellor of the public university that is all hands-on working on the existential issues of our times. Climate change, harbor resiliency, health and wellness, educating all of the children in the Boston public schools to a new level of excellence. That's what the university should focus on. Universities shouldn't have like, a foreign affairs department. Universities should be focused very, very sharply on how we can move the needle in our backyard.
Well, keep moving the needle, my
some
friend.
applause on that one.
Good to see you, Chancellor.
No foreign
as always.
affairs. Our audience agrees with you completely, Chancellor. Thank you so
Come
much
back
for
soon.
being
It's
with
good
us.
to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with UMass Boston Chancellor Marcelo Suarez Orozco, and we thank you very much for coming in and speaking with us. After a quick break, a new NOAA film looks into the time when whales walked on land. Yes, whales have legs, big legs, out of the water and back into the water. That is next on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. We're joined now on Zoom by Nova's David Dugan and anatomist Joy Reidenberg, who's featured in this brand new spectacular documentary, When Whales Could Walk. And yes, that is correct. When Whales Could Walk. It premiered this week on PBS. It's available to stream for free now on pbs.org. David, Joy, congratulations and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here. I don't see David. I do see Joy.
Well, let's get moving.
I'm here.
Oh, you're there.
Hi,
okay,
David.
Okay,
nice to see you.
Oh, there you are, right above her, so I'm all set. Well, let's start with you, David. When could the whales walk?
When? Oh, well, sort of between about 40 or 50 million years ago, I suppose.
Okay.
I mean, what's so interesting about this is that Joy, and it's great that you've got Joy, because my first interest in this came with Joy about 10 years ago on a windswept beach in County Cork when a 65-foot fin whale washed up on the beach, and Joy, and then we were dissecting this thing for about 2 days, and the storms that was blowing a hoolie. But Joy said, no, there's one more thing we've got to do. We've got to find the vestigial limb in the back of this whale. And sure enough, we found it. And ever since that time, which was about 10 years ago, wasn't it, Joy? I just thought, God, this is so extraordinary that whales once upon a time had legs, and that's how I got into it.
Well, what's equally amazing is when you see some scientists led by Hisham Salam in the Sahara, a piece of the Sahara called Valley of the Whales, Joy, who are on their hands and knees in this incredibly vast expanse, literally going maybe 1/100th of a mile an hour, picking up these fossils from whales that were there when there was water there before there was no water there. Can you describe that history a little bit?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that most of the whale fossils that they found were not actually on that plain. They were up in these little mounds that were sticking up higher. Mm-hmm. So they're actually more recent than the stuff they were finding on that flat plain. So the further back in time you go, the deeper down in the layers you go. So a lot of that's been swept away, except for the areas that have been solidified into rock, which is where the whale skeletons are. But down on that flat plain, they were finding things that were even older than the Basilosaurus skeletons that they found. And while it looks tedious walking among the little tiny pebbles looking for something that is a clue to a skeleton of a whale, I have to say it's a lot easier than digging through the ground or breaking up rock to find it. So it kind of reminds me of when I walk on the beach and I look for little shark teeth on the beach. You know, it's tedious, but it's fun and it doesn't require an awful lot of work.
Yeah, but when you walk on the beach, you don't find a 40-million-year-old piece of a whale that had feet. Would you agree to that?
Actually, I won't agree to that.
Probably does.
Because you can walk on the beach and see things that have fallen out of cliffs, like the Calvert Cliffs, for example, on the U.S. East Coast. There are whale teeth that fall out of that cliff periodically, and we have other whale teeth that have been found on places like the California cliffs, certainly in South America. In fact, they just found a new fossil whale in Peru that we're all very excited about.
Wow.
So there's definitely been whales found in other places where they just basically fall out of the cliffs onto the ground, and you see a tooth as you walk by and you realize there's something cool in that cliff. We have to excavate.
Well, you know, math and science and evolution certainly have never been my strong point, but I think what I learned, and correct me if I'm wrong, David, that what evolution, at least for the whales, was getting rid of what didn't work and keeping what worked. So they got rid of the legs because they felt they didn't work for what they...
Yeah, they often say if you don't use it, lose it.
Yeah. Yeah, the legs turned to fins.
This was a case. I mean, what's kind of peculiar is that a few years before, I worked on a series called You're in a Fish, which was actually about how fish turn their fins into limbs. And this was obviously a very long time ago. And then, so for me, coming back to the other way, where you've got mammals, I mean, essentially wolf-like creatures that were walking on land and then going onto the riverbank and then gradually going into rivers and then further on to seas. And then obviously when you reach a certain size, you know, and with all the buoyancy of the water, then limbs become a little bit superfluous. And so, gradually they disappeared. So the fun, and I suppose what's so exciting about what they're doing in Egypt is that they're trying to find the missing bits of the story where the legs gradually got smaller and smaller.
If I could add to that a little bit.
Please.
Evolution doesn't really make vestigial things. So when you talk about limbs being useless, I would actually counter that and say they were useful, but they weren't useful in the traditional way that we think of them as being useful. Basilosaurus had hind legs, but they didn't walk with those legs. The walking whales are actually a lot older, like, as David mentioned, the wolf-like Pakicetus, who was really more deer-like animal, except it had a wolf-like face in the terms of the carnivorous teeth. But the rest of it was much more deer-like. It had little tiny hooves on the tips of its fingers. It probably had a somewhat herbivorous and somewhat carnivorous diet. It was in transition between going from a land animal that was like a deer to an animal that was more of a carnivore in the water. But what happened to those legs in the water is a very interesting story, because as they became smaller and less able to support weight, they took on different functions.
Yeah.
So they weren't really useless. They were just not useful for walking. So one of the theories is that these hind legs were actually used in reproduction. And if we could find enough whales of the same time period that we know are the same species, and we find that they have different sized hind legs, my money would be betting on the bigger ones would belong to the males.
Oh.
Right now, we don't know which ones are males and which ones are females, but those hind legs could have been used as claspers, the way sharks use them, to help engage the female in copulation. So I think one of the most important things about evolution that people forget is that it's all about reproduction and making the next generation.
By the way, you mentioned copulation. Marjorie perked up. It was incredible. Joy, can I stay with you for a second? Am I not right that the fossils that were found on the Sahara, didn't Hisham Salam describe those feet, in quotes, as T-Rex kinds of things, which I think most of us are familiar with, these little tiny things that don't at all comport with the size of the animal. I'm right about that, aren't I?
I actually have used the same analogy in lectures I've given, where I say that Basilosaurus is essentially a backwards T-Rex. But one has to consider that the front legs in T-Rex are not useless. They are useful. They're just not useful for locomotion. They are used for picking apart the prey that it was eating. And so it was using its front legs, but not in the same way that a quadruped, a four-legged animal, would use its front legs.
We're talking with Novus David Dugan and anonymous Joy Reidenberg about their brand new documentary, When Whales Could Walk. It was emphasized several times during this documentary that whales are mammals and they breathe and all this kind of stuff. So why is it a good idea, evolutionary speaking, for mammals that do have to come up to breathe, even though the whales can go way down and stay down for a long time? Why is it useful for mammals to end up in the water?
Food.
Most of the time, the reason to go into a new niche is for food.
Okay.
It can be for other reasons too, maybe successes in other areas like reproduction, but the most common reason is for food. So my guess is that the earliest whales like Pakicetus, were exploring a new niche where they could get a lot more energy from the food they ate if they switched to a carnivorous diet in wading in the shallow waters and picking up small fish. And that turned out to be so advantageous for them that they pursued that line until they became completely aquatic.
Your line, actually, Marjorie was said a few times, your great line, which was so simple in the film, Joy, was something like, they do all things that mammals do, they just do them in the ocean. Yeah. Which really was actually a beautiful description there. For lay people like me, and I think for Martin, this point is made in the Nova film, it's sort of like evolution in reverse kind of thing, is most of us who are lay people imagine these creatures coming out of the water and evolving and then becoming land mammals or land animals. Here, there was an ocean, correct me if I'm wrong, ocean in the Sahara, then it becomes a desert, and then all of a sudden, I guess we have feet, and then they return to the ocean. That is the evolutionary process here. Is it not, Joy, or am I missing an element?
That's pretty close to it. Let me correct one thing. Sure. It didn't turn to a desert first. What happened is that the whales had already gone back into the water at that point. They were in the Tethys Sea. And the Tethys Sea got cut off from the rest of the oceans and gradually evaporated. And as it evaporated, those whales became clustered in the Valley of Whales. And then as that dried out, they just became dead ends there. They couldn't survive once they didn't have the ocean connection. So that's why so many whales are in that place. But they were already in the water before that became a desert. But it's interesting that you talk about these backwards evolution, in the sense that these animals came out of the water, become land animals, and they went back into the water. That is true and very interesting, and not what we would expect a mammal to do. But let's think about how cool evolution is in the first place. When you talk about an animal coming out of the water, we have to take with that animal all of the things that it used to do in the water and do it on land. So it was just as difficult. We still carry remnants of that. That's why our tears are salty. That's why we carry pregnancies inside a fluid-filled womb. We have to maintain all of that water. Our bodies are, I think, something more than 80% water. Yeah. So I think that maintaining our saltwater environment inside our bodies is a challenge for land animals, as much as a mammal going back into the water has the challenge of doing all the things mammals do, ranging from not just the reproductive aspects, which we spoke about, but things like thermoregulation and sensing in the environment. All these things that mammals do, they do in the water.
Can we I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
No, I was just saying in digestion too. I think one of the fascinating things is, the DNA shows that the closest living relative is the hippo. Yeah. But they've also got, whales have got these multiple stomachs, haven't they, Joy? And that's yes. Intriguing, because obviously originally that would have been for a herbivore on land, and then suddenly it's been adapted to eat fish in the sea, and that's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah. Why those multiple stomachs? You started to explain it, but why is that a good idea? I want one stomach do.
It's another case of evolutionary baggage that we might think of as useless, but not useless, really. Okay. It has function, but the functions have changed. Okay. So in their ancestors, which were a lot more like our modern day cows and deer and sheep and goats, these animals those animals had the ability to ruminate or chew their cud. So they had a multi-chambered stomach, and the first chamber was basically a separation vat. The precipitate went to the bottom, the supernatant, the liquid stuff, went on into the next chamber, and the heavy stuff that went to the bottom goes back up to the mouth to be re-chewed. Now in whales, they don't do that. They don't ruminate, and they certainly don't chew their food because they have different kinds of teeth now, and they've pursued a completely different diet. They're now carnivores. All the whales, even the big whales, are carnivores. So what has happened is those multiple chambers of stomach have been adapted to a different purpose. So since they can't chew their food at all, that first chamber of the stomach is acting kind of like a mouth and has mechanical massaging of the food, which they're swallowing whole, to break it up. Because you've got fish with scales and skeletons, spines, all that kind of stuff. That has to be broken up. And then in the following stomach is a glandular stomach that has all of the enzymes necessary to break that food down. And as you go in through multiple chambers, what they've done is they've accentuated that multi-chamber thing, at least in the beaked whale, where you have a lot of chambers. By breaking the food into small components like that, each component has more chance of contact with the surface of the stomach and better digestion by making it in small packets like that.
Can you repeat that, please, Marjorie?
No, I can't.
Hey, Joy, can we play a little sound from this film? Speaking about evolution, I found this really interesting. This is a sort of a snapshot over millions of years of the evolutionary journey that some of these whales are taking around their nostrils. Listen to this.
Land mammals' nostrils are at the tip of the nose. Modern whales' nostrils have moved to the top of their heads to become blowholes. But Anubis's nostrils are a third of the way back on its snout. It's one step closer to becoming fully aquatic.
It's just unbelievable.
And how long does it take, like for the land mammals' nostrils
Marjorie,
to get to the top of their heads to become? I assume this is millions of years.
I'd say so. Yeah.
We're talking a very long time. So so it's too late for all the human beings we've had.
Okay, it takes a long. Yeah, I don't think it's happening while we're here doing the show.
I don't think
Joy,
so.
I have one last thing for you. One of the scenes I love the most is you're doing this dissection. I don't even know if that's the right word. What?
The mama whale. With the baby
No.
on
You get to that in a second. The little tiny whale that washed up on shore and died, and you and a colleague were doing a dissection. And while it's not huge, it's not small either. And then all of a sudden, you pull out this thing that looks like it's the size of a chicken wing, and you identify it as a pelvis. Explain what it was and explain what the significance of that little tiny pelvis found in the whale is vis-a-vis whales walking in another time.
Well, this is actually very similar to what David was mentioning earlier when we dissected a fin whale for another film, Inside Nature's Giants. This pelvis is something that we did not expect to have in an animal that doesn't have legs, but yet it's there. It's in the flank of the whale. It's not attached to the spine anymore. It's become detached and has a new function. So instead of supporting legs, this free-floating little bone in the wall is really important for attaching the muscles of the belly so the whale can swim. And also in male whales, they're slightly larger. Again, reproduction plays a big role here because it attaches the muscles that retract the penis so that the whale can be streamlined when it's swimming. So yes, that little bone is a kind of a surprise. You don't expect to find any bone in the belly area of a whale unless it has to do with locomotion and legs coming out. Now, what is interesting is there was a dolphin, and dolphins are small whales, that actually had hind flippers that was actually captured in Japan. And I had the privilege of being able to work on some of the material from that animal. And in fact, in those hind flippers were all of the precursors of the bones you would expect in a hind limb, showing that the genetics for a hind limb are there in all whales, but they're usually turned off. And once in a while, it gets turned on and a whole limb comes out. And there are other sightings in the literature of whales with hind limbs sticking out of their bodies, not just a pelvis.
So we're almost out of time here, but you had so many great scenes. We hear so many horrible stories here about whales getting caught in fishing lines and then getting hit by boats, and a lot of them are very sad. You had wonderful photographs of families of whales swimming along and looking for whales, etc. But one thing that really I loved was the scene of the mama whale with the baby whale on her back, Joy. So why was mama putting the baby whale on her back?
I think for three reasons. One, I think the baby whale enjoyed it as play and lots of contact with the mom. 2, the baby can rest while the mom can swim to another location faster than just towing along with the baby trying to drag behind and swimming its fastest. But 3, and what we saw, was she was protecting that baby from an aggressive male that was trying to mate with her at the time while we were filming.
Yeah.
And so it was very interesting because that male is not interested in that baby at all. It wants its genes passed on. And so it doesn't care if the baby gets hurt in the mating. And mating can be very brutal. So she was protecting that baby by cradling it on the top of her head and getting it out of the way so the male couldn't hurt it.
It was an incredible piece of photography. There was so much incredible photography here. Jim talking about the Sahara Desert and all the shots of the ocean and the whales and the dolphins and everything else. So congratulations on a fascinating production.
It's great to have you both. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Check it out.
We've been speaking with anatomist Joy Reidenberg and Nova's David Dugan, executive producer of When Whales Could Walk, which is available to stream right now on pbs.org. You'll love it. Your kids will love it. It's really a wonderful documentary. Okay, after a quick break, we're going to end by opening the phone and text lines. If by some miracle you manage to survive falling into a dumpster and then getting tossed into a trash compactor, would you capitalize off the incident, or brush it off, and not tell a soul? That's what happened to one woman in Manchester, New Hampshire. I mean, there's a lot of questions here, Jim. I mean, what do you think about this? Would you, if this happened to your neighbor, would you want to talk to your neighbor about it? Would you be concerned that you'd be known as a dumpster lady for the rest of your life? How to handle this dumpster situation is next. We're going to open the lines and ask you after a quick break. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Dregan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming online at the youtube.com/GBH News. The YouTube? What am I talking about? And facebook.com/GBH News. Okay, I thought there was sound there. There apparently is not. Manchester, Thank you. Now there is. Now, why are you playing that sound, Jim, you might ask? Because that is the beep beep of a dumpster backing up. You'll understand that in a minute. In Manchester, New Hampshire, that's enough. Thank you very much. Home to the Red Arrow Diner, the world-renowned Manchester Doubletree,
That's right.
where Marjorie
That's where we stayed.
walked into a glass wall
That's
last
right. I
week.
did walk into a glass wall.
Well, it's relevant to this. And
I know.
apparently one unnamed woman, not Marjorie, who just survived getting hurled into a trash compactor after accidentally falling into a dumpster. Thank you for your help there. It's the stuff of nightmares, not to mention hugely embarrassing for the woman in question. So for the next few minutes, the rest of the show, we're opening the lines to ask you at 877-301-8970. If you went through something like this, like falling into a dumpster and getting compacted 4 times, but surviving.
In the garbage truck.
Jumping into the Mystic from the Orange Line to escape a burning train. Slipping on, prosciutto at Italy, knowing it would inevitably be the leading line of your obituary. Would you opt not to reveal the incident? Have you experienced anything even comparable to this? And if you have you chosen to keep it to yourself or share your misfortune with others? 877 301-8097.
There are a lot of unanswered questions here, but
Like-
first of all, we should say this was not someone that was living on the streets. This is someone that was in an apartment complex.
She was dumping her garbage. She fell
was
into the
dumping garbage.
dumpster.
And that's the first thing you say. Okay, we've all dumped garbage in a dumpster. Maybe we've done it illegally when we're putting our own garbage in somebody else's dumpster.
Sure.
But I can't. You think of yourself, how do you fall into a dumpster?
Maybe you dropped something in there and you reached in to get it and you fell in.
Well, I would not go into the dumpster too, because oftentimes, you know what there are on those dumpsters, Jim? Rats.
But
Rats
you know,
in the
but do you
dumpster.
understand that not only the dumpster was then picked up by the
That's
garbage
right.
truck, and she was compacted
That's
4
right.
times.
So are you unable to get out of the dumpster?
That's a
Are
good
you
question.
stuck in the dumpster?
Would
How
you
do
talk
wind
about
up-
it if I... Well, by the way, you talked about it when you walked into a wall.
I walked into
you
a
made
wall.
a video about it.
We made
so
it. Well, I
obviously-
didn't make the video about
Well,
it.
you agreed
I
to
was
make the
I was
video.
coerced into making the video
Fine.
about it, and there we are. Me walking into the wall several times reenacted. But that's walking into a wall is nowhere near going into a dumpster.
No.
And then getting picked up when the garbage truck comes by.
4 times.
And you're thrown in the back of the garbage truck
Yeah.
with the dirty diapers and all the
Yeah.
food and
No, it's
all
not
this
good.
waste and all this thing. And they keep compacting the thing.
Sure.
And now we should say that she's going to be okay. This woman is going to be okay. She did have
Minor
some broken
damage,
bones,
minor
but she's
damage.
going to be okay.
She's fine.
So how do you deal with this? Do you if this is your next door neighbor, and you know she was in the dumpster, and do you
Forget your next door
do you
neighbor if it
mention
was
this to
you.
her? Do you ask her about this? Do you ask her
How
she's
was your
doing?
time in the dumpster? Is that what you say? How do you broach that? By the way,
I don't
Jamie
know.
just sent us a note. When he was locked in the men's room, he said, I thought the only other place I'd rather be is inside a trash compactor, which I think is understandable
You know,
under the circumstances.
we have a New Hampshire writer who has a very good point here.
What
This
is
is
it?
Jean from Derry, New Hampshire.
What'd she say?
Better to be known as simply the dumpster lady
Yeah.
than the dead dumpster lady, and that's a very good
it's
point.
an
It's good
excellent
that it's good that she survived. And Allie from Duxbury is hoping somebody had a video. We don't know if anybody had a video. Lots of times there are videos, and heaven knows, wouldn't we all like to look at the video? And we have a gentleman who's pointing out that Jim had a moment like this. You've neglected to point this out.
What's that?
The time we had to get the WD-40 to get you out of the chair at Fenway Park.
Well, that's actually
Jim
true. I
Jim
talked about that.
Jim was stuck.
We got free tickets to a Red Sox playoff because we begged in the air.
Yeah.
And they gave us, the head guy was head of SBLI, called us in pity, and I couldn't get out of the chair in the 7th inning stretch. We didn't have to use WD-40, Marjorie.
We almost
We did
did.
have to struggle to get me
We
out of the
almost
chair.
did.
That's true.
Paul from Worcester says he loves the consistency of the show. We had the guy who was swallowed by the whale, Jim, and escaped
Michael
that.
Packard,
Michael
right?
Packard. That was
Yeah.
that was something. He got on Jimmy Kimmel, and it had a movie made about him, right?
Yeah.
By David Abel from
By
the
David
Globe.
of
It's
the Globe,
a
yeah.
great movie. The man who was spit out of the mouth of a whale. That's something to tell your friends about. Today we're talking about whales who walked, and now we have a woman who was swallowed by a dumpster, preceded by a story about dumpsters swimming down the street. That was because of a heavy
Would you tell,
rain.
other than to me, which I assume
Would
you
I
would
tell
share,
anybody about
if
this?
you fell into the
No.
dumpster in your neighborhood, would you tell me?
No, I would not. Well, maybe I'd tell you, but I can see why I shouldn't want to give her name.
Would you
to
put it on the
local
air or
authority.
not?
No. I think I would not want to talk about my time in the dumpster because this was not a pleasant time. And that's the question. How do you handle these kinds of things?
But if you have a
know?
horrible experience-
Do you tell your family members? Do you swear everyone to
For
secrecy?
example, let me give an example about what, would you tell? Let's assume you're lying in bed, you wake up, you roll over, and the person next to you is Donald Trump. Would you tell anybody? I think the answer is most people would not. Would you agree?
Okay, we've got Susan from
877-301-8097.
Susan from Manchester by the Sea.
Thank you,
for calling.
Susan.
What a
Hi.
great name for a town, Manchester
Fabulous.
by the Sea.
Hi, Susan.
Susan, what do you think about the dumpster?
What's your deal?
Well, my deal is I actually went into a dumpster on purpose.
Sure.
Last fall, we had a really bad high winds, and I went down to our Singing Beach on I have a small Yamaha 125. So I went down on that, and I was down looking at the ocean, and I was wiping my eyes and blowing my nose. The wind was crazy, and I thought, well, I better get home. It's getting too nasty, and I'm on a bike. So I, as I went to the bike, which I always park next to a dumpster at Singing Beach parking lot, I had tissue in my pocket, reached in my coat pocket, threw it into the dumpster, and then headed home on the bike. When I got home, I realized my cell phone was not in my pocket.
Oh, my God.
And I was like, uh-oh. So I figured just perhaps, I had thrown it in the dumpster. I got in my car, knowing that I couldn't get into the dumpster. I had to climb up to get into the dumpster. So I took my car down. I climbed up in the hood of my car, got into the dumpster, and there wasn't too many things in there.
No.
And then I did find the phone, but then I couldn't get out.
That's a problem. That's a real problem.
So,
How'd you get out of there?
Fortunately, there were two young men who were also, observing the storm.
Yeah.
And I called over to them, and I said, "You have a
"Excuse
cell
me,
phone?"
I'm in the
And they
dumpster."
sort of
Yeah.
looked at me.
Yeah.
They just saw the top of my head, of course.
Of course. Yeah. No,
And,
I'd come help you under those circumstances. Go ahead.
Yeah, right.
What
Would you
happened?
come in with me?
Go ahead.
And I said, please call my cell phone. Sure enough, my cell phone rang. That's when I found the phone. But for a while there, I was in a panic. No one was around, and I was thinking, how do I get out of this dumpster?
Did you try to climb out to no avail?
I tried to, but there weren't many things in it, so it was hard to grab hold and try to, because they're on a slant.
Uh-huh.
And
there were no rats in there, Susan, were there?
No, I did think of that, though.
Yeah. How was the stench?
That would have really, yeah.
Now,
so these.
Okay, go ahead.
These nice young men, really, I'm sure they probably have not been back to the beach since, but.
Well, that's a hell of a
hoisted
story,
you out.
Susan. We didn't expect one of those, but thank you very much. We didn't expect anybody who actually spent time in a dumpster. Do you know that they're dumpster diving? Some people do that to
Dumpster diving
get things.
for food. We had them on the radio.
Oh, we did have those
Yes,
people
and they
in.
brought in these
Susan,
incredible
thanks.
platters of food that they've gotten out of dumpsters.
And we
their
ate
point
some,
was,
didn't we?
their point was that people throw away food that is
perfectly
good. So that's why people should compost. They don't have to throw out food that's perfectly good. Because I think 30% of our food is totally wasted, Jim.
It is.
And thrown in dumpsters where people can wind up getting stuck in them, like poor Susan just did, and this poor unnamed lady who was not only stuck in the dumpster, we don't know how she got in. I don't know if maybe she was looking for her cell phone, and then she was in there in the truck. Can you imagine?
It'd be bad.
Panic. The truck is coming.
By the way, we didn't expect, as I say, anybody calling who'd spend time inside a dumpster. If you have, and you tell the call screener, we'll pop you up to the top of the list. They're called freegans. That's what they're called.
Freegans. That is correct.
Yeah, it's free, and they look for guns. That's where they get their name.
Stuart from Needham.
Stuart,
what do you think,
what's
Stuart?
your deal?
Good morning or good afternoon.
To you
so,
too.
This happened. Can you hear me?
Yes,
we can. Yep.
Okay, good. This happened to my dad. One morning, I'm in 6th grade. I'm up in my room getting dressed for school, and I hear this loud crash. And I look out the window, and my father. We have a 2-car garage. My dad went in to open one garage door, went in and got in the other car and backed it out through the closed door.
That is great.
Now he was mortified by this. He
Can't
was
understand
so
why.
embarrassed.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't you know that one of our neighbors happens to be a cartoonist, and he wrote a daily cartoon for the White Plains Reporter Dispatch down in New York.
Yeah.
And he put it in. He made a cartoon out of it, a little four square, 4-frame cartoon, which I still have. And I think my dad finally began to laugh about it after a while.
Now, the issue here, that's quite a story, Stuart. Did he talk about that willingly with people outside the family, or was that something he preferred not be discussed?
No, he did. He preferred not to.
Yeah.
And of course, his friend, the cartoonist, knew that he preferred not to.
Good for him.
So actually, his name appeared in the cartoon.
Whoa.
Oh, my God.
The guy says to him, hey, Jones, what happened?
Stuart, let me ask the most obvious question. If he opened the door for the other car, why did he drive the car out for which the door was not open? Have you ever figured out that conundrum?
Right. So what? Yeah. So I think what happened is there were the garage door closest to the back door of our house was already open.
I see.
So he just walked into it and got in the wrong car.
Got in the wrong car. That happens all the time. Yeah.
And he was thinking about work or something.
Sure.
And all.
Well,
it still makes me laugh.
It makes us laugh too. That's a hell of a story, Stuart. Thank you for sharing that. We appreciate it.
We are telling the tale of a New Hampshire woman from Manchester, New Hampshire, who apparently, we don't know how, but she wound up falling into a dumpster and was still in the dumpster when the trash truck came by and picked her up, threw it into the trash truck, and she was in there and survived 4 compactings.
How do you survive any compacting?
I don't
didn't
know.
think of that
well,
till
she
just
did.
now.
She survived 4
You know what
compactings. We're very
compacting
glad
means?
she did.
That's
yeah,
when the thing
they
goes
squish all exactly. They squish all the garbage together, and she made it. We're very glad that she did. We have a texter who said they felt on the bluff at the Beachcomber in Wellfleet. You can see that happening,
Oh, that's
right?
scary.
Yeah, hanging out with the band after the show. No one noticed he was gone, and he didn't tell anybody about it either.
That's a good story.
Frank
Yes,
from
now.
Rhode Island, thank you for calling.
Hey, Frank, what's your deal?
Yeah, good afternoon. I wanted to commiserate with Marjorie about with her story.
Yeah, please do.
Yes, I was about 5 or 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I will never forget. This was a beautiful Friday afternoon, the sun shining. I had a conference at a hotel that I had, a Friday afternoon conference.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happened the hotel had just newly opened, and they had this beautiful plate glass. I'll never forget, beautiful plate glass front, entranceway that all these maintenance people were shining up for the weekend, conceivably. So the conference is about, whatever, I'm getting bored. I'm thinking about the weekend. I'm saying, geez, maybe I can get out of here early, get home, and we had something planned that night. So there was a break about 2:30, I think it was, and good time to make my exit. So I'm not, I'm daydreaming, of course, wondering if anyone's noticed me leave. So I'm walking out full bore, bang, right into the plate glass window.
How'd that go for you?
You got to be kidding me! I put my hand up to my forehead, and there's blood gushing out of it.
Oh, that is very sad.
Oh.
Yeah. So I ended up spending the afternoon in the emergency room. I ended up getting home like at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I said, it serves me right. I should have stayed to the end of the conference, and I would have been home earlier.
Now, Frank, have you watched the video of Marjorie thudding into the glass wall in Manchester yet, or no?
No, I haven't, because I think I still have PTSD.
Well, that's possible. But when you're ready for it, I'd check it out if I were you. Frank, thanks for sharing that story. Is this true, Ethan, or are you making this up? Ethan, our coworker, says, this is incredible. The Manchester garbage truck driver is claiming this wasn't the first time that somebody ended up in the compactor in the back of his garbage truck. We have sound from the guy? Oh, here he is. Zoe, thank you very much. Here's the, you're not supposed to call it garbage truck, a sanitation worker who's driving the truck. Here he is.
I talked to the driver. He seemed to be okay. It's not the first time this has happened to him. That was definitely one for the books.
Okay, well, that's short and concise.
Okay.
Sort of says what needed to be said there.
Listen to this. This is Kathy is talking about an embarrassing incident that happened to her. I worked in a large department store, used the bathroom the opposite side of the store, finished, walked back to the opposite of this very large department store, when my coworker pointed out the back of my skirt was stuck in the waistband of my tights.
That's a problem.
And my butt was exposed the whole walk across the store on Black Friday. That's a good one, Kathy.
Good.
I think that happens a lot where people walk out. They've got, people have like toilet paper in their shoes,
That's
or they
great.
have
I
toilet
love
paper
that
hanging
look.
down. Yeah, it's a very attractive thing. An awful lot of people are texting Jim to say they got stuck in dumpsters too.
I really find that hard to believe.
Listen to this. This is from Susan in Marblehead. I'm totally triggered by this conversation. In 4th grade, I went into the dumpster by the cafeteria to get Susan's retainer that she threw out with her lunch.
Sure.
She was crying. I was going to go through the trash for her. In high school, I told her that her boyfriend was cheating on her, and she hasn't spoken to me since.
Really?
Yeah, there you
What's
go.
it got to do with anything?
She went into the dumpster to get the...
How many people in the Newsfeed Cafe, people here, how many of you have spent time inside a dumpster? Can you raise your hand? No, that is a lie. Is that true? There's one woman in the back.
There you go.
Oh, 2. Another one.
2. It's an
3?
epidemic. 3.
This is not possible.
Yeah. Maybe one of them is Michelle from Chester, Vermont.
That is unbelievable.
Who climbed into a recycling dumpster to retrieve a blow dryer that wasn't supposed to be there.
Excuse me a second. The guy sitting with the woman here, did you know she got stuck in a dumpster before she just raised her hand? Tell the truth. And you chose to forget it. Is that what it is? I don't blame you. Thank you very much for your honesty. We appreciate it. 3 people in the audience have spent time in a dumpster. That's a pretty remarkable number, I would say. Would you not, Marjorie?
I would say that we're getting texters from, I have at least 5 people who said they wound up in dumpsters. I guess.
Here's another one. Bill in Carlisle. He spent time in a dumpster too. What's the deal? Bill.
Well, a few years ago, Hello?
Yeah, you're here. We're glad you're here. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
A few years ago, my wife went out and bought a very nice winter coat.
Sure.
And I dutifully took the cardboard box in which it came, brought it to our recycling center.
Sure.
And thought I was doing the right thing, and my phone rang. My wife said, "You better get that box back. It's got the slip inside, and I can return the coat for I get the lower price."
Oh.
So I jump into the dumpster, and I'm searching high and low. All of a sudden, my phone rings. It's my wife. Oh, never mind. I found the slip.
That's a good one.
And there I am, neck deep in the dumpster, and two very good friends come along and say, Bill, what the hell are you doing in the dumpster?
That's a pretty good story there, Bill. Were you worried that compaction might be in your future or what?
No, I was too focused on the wrath of my wife.
I got it.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
Better
that's a
not
hell of
fool
a
around.
story, too. Bill, thank you for sharing that with us. We appreciate it.
Okay, we have a couple of people who did some other crazy things. Marianne from Franklin's husband drove into the garage with the Christmas tree on top of the car, not once, but twice. And then listen to this one. My dad drove his boat of a car through the back of the garage, and the garage top popped off like a Tupperware top.
Huh.
He casually got out of the car, came into the house, got a cup of coffee. After that, he was only allowed to drive the car in the driveway.
By the way, Nicole, just our coworker, posed the question, then she erased it. She thought better of it, but it's too late. She asked if anybody listening had ever gotten caught in a washer or a dryer, and then it turned on. Did she say before the show she wanted to do that, or she was scared of that? I can't remember. Can you check that? Can you ask her what the answer to that? Oh, here she is. Oh, no, that's Jamie. She wanted to do that. Does anybody here ever spend time inside a washer dryer? How about you? You must have. You? Yes? No? You sure? Tell the truth. Raise your hand. No, you didn't? Okay, fine. Okay, in any case, 877, well, we're almost out of time while you're giving the number. Bob in Oklahoma?
Hi, Bob.
Hey, Bob, what's up?
Hey,
Hi.
This happened when my first day of working at Wendy's. I was taking the trash out.
Yeah.
And I get to the dumpster, and there's two people going through the dumpster.
Sure.
And they look at me going, we were on a trip, and we took our money, and we had slid it down between the cellophane and the cigarette pack.
Oh.
And they had finished the cigarettes. This is when you could smoke in restaurants.
Sure.
And threw it away. And they got down the road and realized. So I said, I'm just going to leave the trash here. Will you throw it in the dumpster when you're done? So I just walked away.
That was actually very generous of you. Was that out in Oklahoma?
No, that was in Indiana, actually.
Indiana. No, it happens in Indiana.
Yeah, a lot of dumpster diving out there in Indiana.
Thank you.
as I
Midwest.
understand it.
It's a thing they do in the Midwest.
It's big. It's big.
It is.
Okay.
87. Well, don't give the number. Where are we going next?
We have one more.
We have time
John
for one more.
in Woburn.
Hey, John.
Hi, John.
Hello, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Listen,
Yeah.
we were building out our new office space,
Yeah.
and there was a glass panel right next to the glass door.
Uh-oh.
And I told the contractor, I said, we better do something about this because somebody's going to hurt themselves.
And
5 minutes later, I turned around, smashed my head against it, broke my glasses, cut my forehead, and I was right.
That's right.
Well, that's incredibly
I can relate to
insightful
that
on your
totally
part, too.
because I did it. Some other people did it too, but they didn't take a video of
Yeah,
them
who was the
doing
other
it.
person? John, thanks. Someone else did.
Other
Who
members
did?
of our.
Oh, Zoe.
Zoe walked in.
But
it was very easy to do
the
that.
thud with yours was really impressive.
It was
that
a
was a
big thud.
reenactment, though, I believe.
The reenactment. I did a reenactment. Yeah.
But there was a real thing.
There
where
was
you
a
walked
real
into the
thing that I
glass
walked
thing.
into the glass. That's right.
Okay, John.
And
thanks
apparently
for calling.
Azita did it too. So it was an epidemic up there. We're a very cool, coordinated group. We're up there in Manchester, New Hampshire,
yeah.
walking through
I've spent time
the glass
in New
wall
Hampshire, too.
outside our studios.
Sure we have.
And what's the question many of us have here,
What is
the
it?
texters, is they don't understand how somebody falls into a dumpster because
We've had like
they're
20
pretty
people
high.
who spent
they
time in
mostly,
dumpsters.
No, they climbed in to get something.
Okay,
They
fine.
didn't fall in.
You don't know what happened to this woman.
I don't. But it's hard for me to think because your dumpster is higher than you usually. You know what I mean?
It is.
So how would you fall into it? That's what I'm not sure. She must have been looking for something and then she got stuck. That's the only answer. Okay. That's why we have these panels on the glass. Ha ha ha.
So Marjorie
to make
doesn't
sure
walk
that
into
Marjorie
the window?
doesn't walk into the window
I don't
and
think
away to
that'll
the
stop
studio.
her. Denali, can you do it? Westford, 30 seconds. Can you pull it off? Go.
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was stuck in the lunchroom at my school many years ago because you could lock it in the locker from the outside, but not the inside.
That's a problem.
And I was in there getting ready for my class on Monday. I wasn't expecting anybody in the room until Monday. There were no cell phones.
Oh.
So, no! At that time.
So
no
what'd you
phone
do?
In the room.
What'd you do?
Well, I didn't panic, but I looked at the windows. They were very high. I couldn't do it.
Sure.
Finally, it turns out there was a basketball game, and I laid down on the floor.
Sure.
And I shouted underneath the door, and I called to the children who were playing basketball. I said, "Please go get an adult."
That's a heartwarming story,
Rescued
Denali.
by the basketball
That's beautiful. Denali,
team.
thank
That
you
is
for
wonderful.
sharing your tale. We appreciate it.
Okay,
so
we are
to speak.
done. We are done. Thank
We
you for
are
listening
done.
to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Thank you to the people who came down to the Boston Public Library.
Thank you
really
all. We
appreciate
appreciate it.
You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast. Thank you, which is 3 hours or a half hour. You can tune in on Monday for Frontline's Michael Kirk on his new documentary. It's called Democracy on Trial, about the criminal cases against Donald Trump related to January 6th. We'll also talk with the NAACP's Michael Curry, Harvard alien authority Avi Loeb. I'm excited about that.
Me too.
He's got a new book out about aliens, Jim. The Reverends Ira Monroe and Emmett G. Price III, and our food policy man, Corby Cummer. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews. She walked into the door as well. Aidan Conley, he did not walk into the door. Neither did Nicole Garcia or Hannah Loss or Ethan Kotler, and neither did John the Claw Parker or our executive producer, Jamie Bologna. But Zoe and I, we did it. Jamie was stuck in the men's room for like 4 hours, so he's not one to talk. Special thanks to the BPL team, Maddie Geyer, Matthew Glover, Brad Lewis, Carly Cochran, and Isabella Karen. Stay tuned to 89.7 GBH. The Culture Show's Week in Review is coming up right after us at 2 o'clock. I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thank you so much for tuning in today.
Have a great
Hope you can
weekend.
tune in tomorrow. Now, tomorrow we won't be here. On Monday, have a great weekend. Have a great weekend.